Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm glad y'all are here on a Saturday morning. We were just in Nashville yesterday morning and the day before, and we're meeting with some folks there. So from Nashville to Asheville to Hendersonville. And we went to the Biltmore yesterday just to check it out. So really happy that you all are out here this morning. And what I'd like to do, there's a lot we can do. And what I'd like to do is, as much as we can, I'd like to make this a discussion, especially with this kind of a group. Now I have to present some information to you so that you at least get a foundation of what's going on. But I want to start off just by saying this. I've been doing this a long time. We go around the country. My partners and I, there are four of us. One of them, E.J. Kimball, who's the president of SEG, used to be an assistant and worked as a staff member to Congresswoman Sue Myrick of Charlotte, who I suspect many of you know. And he was the guy who set up the Anti-Terrorism Caucus on Capitol Hill. My other colleague is Steve Coughlin, who is the expert on Islamic law as it relates to jihad in the United States. I would argue in the West, but certainly in the U.S. And the fourth team member we have is a guy named Fred Grandy, who some of you may know. He's a former U.S. congressman, radio talk show host, and played Gopher on the Love Boat, actually, if any of you remember that show. But quite frankly, he's a very bright guy, an amazing patriot. And the four of us, Fred recently joined our team, but the rest of us have been working together for quite a while. And we worked with Sue Myrick. We do quite a bit, and have kind of brought her staff along to understand the depth of this problem. We spend a lot of our time on Capitol Hill talking to members of Congress, trying to get them to understand this. And but we find that the best time spent, believe it or not, is doing things like this. Because it's our belief that once you understand this problem can only be answered at the local level. And that means local police, citizens, local town councils. And I think by the time we get done here today, you might understand why that is. Now, what I plan to do is we're going to go, we're supposed to go till 12:30 today. What I'd like to do is go for about an hour and 20 minutes and break. And I think you're going to find it's not going to be boring. And we're going to break for maybe 15, 20 minutes, come back in. And then what I'd like to do is I'm going to give you, here's the threat. That's what I'm going to do this for the first piece. Then we'll break, and when we come back, talk about, okay, what are the founding principles of this country? And I suspect many of you in this room know that, since we have some you all are patriots in here. And then if you contrast what I give you first with who we're supposed to be, it's black on white, and there's a big contrast. What I'll argue is, because we've watered down who we are, we're trying to contrast black on gray. And there's not, it just doesn't seem as bad to us. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then the couple things I'd like to do in the end is I'd like to give you some things that you can do, because that's the biggest question. Okay, you've given us this massive threat. What do I do? I do X. I'm retired, or I work in a store, or I do this. Whatever you do, how does it impact me, and what can I do? And I want to try and answer some of that. And then I'd like to spend the last portion just Q&A, like the last 20 to 30 minutes, really just an open discussion. But during this whole thing, I want it to be a discussion also. I don't just want to talk at you. I want you all to interact, because I don't care if we get through the actual presentation. It's more that as long as you get an understanding of what's going on. Now, the only thing I like to throw out right in the beginning is this. In the introduction, you heard Jen say, I put together the first training program in the FBI that talks about this subject. And today in the FBI, this is not being taught to FBI agents that work counterterrorism issues. And there's a reason for that. So I want you to think about this. Who the Muslim Brotherhood is, their presence in this country and how they operate is not being taught to DHS, FBI, etc. Nor is it being taught as a matter of course to your state police in North Carolina or your local police detectives. The question has to be asked, why or why not? Okay? And what I'm going to demonstrate to you today is this. Every major Islamic advisor inside the federal government and at the state government level is either a Muslim brother or working with the Muslim Brotherhood in the global Islamic movement. And that is a fact. And if you want to give me a name or an organization, we can walk it right back. But I'm going to give you enough today to show you that the very people advising the Secretary of State, working in the White House, working with the DHS, with the FBI, are either Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, etc. That's a fact.
My father was Muslim.
So the very people advising your DOD, General Petraeus, and everyone else on how to fight the war over there, or working on the counterterrorism strategy in North Carolina or anywhere in the U.S., the very people advising us on how to do that are the bad guys. So maybe that might help you understand why we're 10 years into wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we are crushing them on the battlefield, but we're no closer to strategic victory today than we were 5 years ago. You see how that might be? Because if the enemy can keep us working on a strategy that will never get to victory, but we keep expending money and lives and energy, because they don't expect to win on the battlefield. They expect to win here. And I'm going to show you how they intend to do it, and that in fact they're doing it. And therefore, if they have a plan that they're executing on, in other words, they say, this is how we're going to win, and they're doing it, and we're not even looking at their stuff to see how they plan to win, and we're allowing them to operate in our system like this, that means they, the enemy, is making the decisions or influencing the decisions that our leadership makes that has national security ramifications, which means it doesn't just affect the U.S. as a whole, it affects you in this room. And that's foreign policy, that's national policing policy, and that's your First and Second Amendment rights, which actually I would argue has nothing to do with the Bill of Rights. You don't need the Bill of Rights to tell you what your rights are. You have those rights absent of the Bill of Rights. Yes, sir?
Can we ask questions as you go along?
You may. Here's just a couple ground rules. If you ask a question, make it a question. Okay? If you've got something you want to relate to me, like a story or a question about something going on in your neighborhood, hold that till either we break or those of you that are going afterwards, we'll talk about those. But ask a question. And I prefer that it be on kind of where we are in the presentation. Because a lot of it, and if I say I'm going to cover that, trust me, I'll cover it. So do you have a question right off the bat, sir?
I feel bad about breaking it up, but very quickly, what you just said sounds like 101. So how in the world was that attitude, or these consultants, how long have they been in place? 1
Okay,
year?
that's definitely going to be answered.
Okay.
They've been here for 50 years,
Yep.
but they've really made their main push since the early 90s.
Okay.
And I'm going to walk you through some of that.
I
Did you have
won't
a
ask
question?
any more.
Okay, yeah, and we're going to get to that. So are we good on the ground rules? So as we go through, all your questions, I think, are going to be answered in the first 30 minutes. Because what I want to accomplish really 3 or 4 things here today. Number one, I want you to know that there is something that the enemy calls, not me, the enemy calls the global Islamic movement, and that it's real, and that it's not just Al-Qaeda. As a matter of fact, Al-Qaeda is not even the most important part of it. Okay? And yet we, at the national security level, meaning the U.S., America, we are completely focused on Al-Qaeda, which is exactly what the enemy wants us to do, so that they can come in behind and take us down, right? You know, I can beat a professional boxer, if I'm allowed, while he's boxing someone else, to come in behind him and hit him in the back of the head with a bat, I will win that. Okay? Even if he's twice my size and he's a professional. That's the way it works. They're not looking for the front-on victory. They know they can't beat us on the battlefield. So that's what I want you to understand. So I want you to understand that there is a global Islamic movement. I want you to understand the players in it. And I want you to understand that this is not a fragmented movement with a bunch of fringe individuals and groups. It is a global, unified movement. And in the next 10 minutes, that will become clear. And that all the people we call our allies in this world war are not, as a matter of fact. Okay? I'm going to walk you through. I encourage you to challenge any of this. I started to say, and I didn't get through my sentence. My only ground rule here is this. I want you to challenge anything that you think is not true here today. Okay? And the only thing I ask is that you use facts. If something I say here today you don't like, I'm a Marine, that falls in the so sad, too bad category. We are so far beyond that where we are. We are losing. Let me break any illusion you have. We are losing badly. And yet we keep putting this facade up. How many, raise your hand if you think we're winning in Iraq and Afghanistan and that we're going to walk away victorious. Okay, for those of you not looking around, nobody has their hands up. Now, shouldn't that concern us?
Yeah.
The most powerful military in the world is not going to walk away from these two major engagements victorious. And it's not because our military isn't crushing them on the battlefield. We are crushing them. Think about that. How is that possible? How many of you are former military or current military? Okay? Thank you for your service. So that's my only ground rules. I want you to challenge me, okay? But try to do it in a manner where we keep it in the factual realm, because that's all I'm going to give you. I'm going to provide you facts and evidence and data. So let me go back to what I was saying. We're going to talk about the Islamic movement, who the major players are, and to show you that it's a unified movement. I'm going to talk to you about what they rely on, what they say, not what I say, what they say they rely on to fight us. And they say they rely on Islamic law. So we're going to briefly talk about that. What is Islamic law? We can go in deep as you want to go. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the fact that every government agency in the national security realm, to include the National Security Council to the President, has, working with it or advising it, senior Muslim brothers in the United States. That we go around the country and do several programs. Excuse me, the one that's most prominent is a 3-day program we do for law enforcement, military, National Guard. And I'm going to throw this out as an example. We'll talk about a few more examples and we'll get rolling. Our training, we've been doing this now since the end of 2007, okay? Or end of 2008, really. But we did it some in 2007. But since this fall and winter of 2008, we've been going around the country and doing these briefs. To law enforcement, military, National Guard. And the other side knows who we are. I guarantee you Hamas knows that I am standing here right now in this library. There is no doubt about it. And if you doubt that, I can tell you we'll find out next week, but I'm pretty sure they know. Now, why is that important? Because there is something in your Department of Homeland Security called the Countering Violent Extremism Working Group. Because, of course, we're fighting violent extremism. Because we can't be fighting Islam, because Islam is a religion of peace. That's what President Clinton said. That's what President Bush said. That's what President Obama said. So when a President of the United States, who's the Commander-in-Chief, says that, there is a real effect on your intelligence community. Because now they're told you have to go find the enemy, but you can't look at Islam. So what else can you look at? Well, it must be violent extremism. I don't know what that is, but for those of you who don't know how DHS defines it, everyone in this room, if you're willing to fight and die for the Constitution, you are a violent extremist. So, Countering Violent Extremism Working Group, there are 12 people on that working group that advise Secretary Napolitano on countering violent extremism. 10 of them are Muslim brothers. 10. And this is a problem. That means the Muslim Brotherhood is defining the strategy. And not only that, they are currently writing the curriculum and the standards for training for the U.S. government, because they want to keep people like us out. And they have specifically said that. Okay? At the end of the brief here, I'll talk. 3 weeks ago, there was a hit piece on me on NPR. Some of you know what NPR is. I have some other acronyms I use for those letters, but we're in a mixed crowd, so I'll keep that to myself. Why is that important? There is a massive push right now to take anybody who talks about this the way we're going to talk about it today and get them out. Get them out. Now, I will argue, as a private citizen working for a private corporation, that is a gross violation of my freedom of expression. And legally, if I can show what I'm doing is factually correct, and by the way, I've had Muslim brothers sitting in rooms where I've given this presentation, and none of them have ever said anything we're putting out is factually incorrect. They just don't like that we're saying it. So I use that as some of the bona fides about what we're talking about here today. We've told all of them, if you can show us where we're factually incorrect, we'll change our brief. I can tell you since 2007, I haven't changed any presentation because of that. So think about that as a little entree. Yes, ma'am?
Which organization did you say had the 10 Muslim Brotherhoods?
The Countering Violent Extremism Working Group for the Department of Homeland Security. You might argue there are only 8 and 2 of them are really affiliates, but you get the point. You can make that argument, and I'd be okay with that. There's still 10 bad guys on there. So let's kind of begin. See, we haven't even really begun the brief here. And as I mentioned, in the end, we'll take Q&A. We'll talk about what you can do before we leave here today. This is, let me get this squared away here. There we go. Okay. This is called the Outlawed brief. And I've been doing this now for about 6-7 months. And it's called the Outlawed brief for 2 reasons, but it's pretty much the same reason. Number one, there are people actively trying to criminalize this discussion because it's defamatory, according to the enemy, towards Islam. And if it's defamatory towards Islam, it should be criminalized as hate speech, even though it's factually correct. Now, I don't want to dive too deep into it, but for those of you who don't know, that is the Islamic legal definition of slander, is saying anything about Islam that they don't like, whether it's true or not. And the crime for that, the punishment for that, is capital punishment, which is why Theo Van Gogh, overseas, some of you may know him, wrote a film about Islam. He's dead, and why they want the writers of the cartoons dead, and why anybody that speaks up and says anything factual but that they don't like about Islam, they threaten their lives, which is why most folks like that carry, especially in Europe, have large security groups following them around. Okay, so, but let me give you a practical side of that. Before Christmas, I was at, and actually, we were at DHS, or excuse me, we were at Marine Corps headquarters Marine Corps in Arlington, Virginia, speaking to a group of about 50 people, but it included senior intelligence people and others, and there were 6 people from DHS headquarters. And during one of the breaks, one of those guys was overheard by my colleague saying, referring to me, "He can't talk like this, it's illegal." Now you can say, well, that guy's a wingnut, but he's working at DHS headquarters as a supervisor in the intelligence unit. So if you think I'm kidding about this, this stuff's real. And when you hear people on TV saying they want to muzzle you, they're not kidding. I am telling you, inside the system, if we had this discussion in the Pentagon, if you're a colonel, you're a major, you're a 1-star, you get fired. You don't have this discussion inside the Pentagon.
Freedom of speech.
And I've been in there. Last time I was in the Pentagon was about 2 months ago, and they shuffled me into a little skiff, and there were 3 of us in a room. They closed the door, and they're like, okay. It's ridiculous. This is our Defense Department. All right, anybody know who that guy is besides people that have seen this brief before? Abdurrahman al-Amoudi? Anybody want to guess? Do you think he's a good guy or a bad guy? All right.
It's all in the name.
Abdurrahman al-Amoudi was the senior leader in the Islamic community in the United States in the 1990s and the early 2000s. He was the Islamic advisor to President Clinton. He was a goodwill ambassador for the State Department and participated in the Middle East peace process on behalf of the U.S. government. He created the Muslim Chaplain program for the Department of Defense, and he was a leader or founder of almost 24 of the most prominent Islamic organizations in North America.
It should be a bad guy then.
And in 2003, he was arrested at Heathrow Airport with $340,000 cash that he got from Muammar Gaddafi of Libya for the global jihad. He was extradited to Virginia, to the Eastern District of Virginia in Alexandria, pled guilty, and was implicated in a plot with 2 UK-based al-Qaeda guys to kill Saudi Crown Prince, now King Abdullah. It came out that he was a major financier for al-Qaeda. This guy, the advisor to the President of the United States, is al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas operative. Now in prison in Colorado for what was originally 23 years. They just reduced his sentence to a total of approximately 16 years. So now he'll be out in 6 years. That's the advisor of the President of the United States. That's just one example. So let me just do this real quick. I want to show you something so you might see why this might be problematic. First this.
The community is so on the alert that if anybody comes and talks about any of
Al-Amoudi whipped a Muslim
problems, they will be reported right away. So
he was an architect.
Okay, so he's at the National Press Club giving a talk, and he says, of course, this is Al-Qaeda guy at the National Press Club. Now, you see he doesn't have an AK-47 strapped across his back, and he's not screaming in front of the cameras, Allahu Akbar, Jihad. Unfortunately, let's go to 1999.
Relations between the Jews in the United States.
CIA. They opened up.
A year later, Al-Amoudi whipped a Muslim crowd up into a frenzy at a Washington, D.C. rally, just steps from the White House. This video was taken by Emerson's group after the mainstream media had left for the day.
anybody is a supporter of Hamas here? Hear that, Bill Clinton? We are all supporters of Hamas. Allahu Akbar. I'm also a supporter of Hezbollah. Anybody supports Hezbollah here?
We gave the video to a reporter, and the reporter called him up, and he first denied actually being at the rally. And then when the reporter said, I have this tape, he told the reporter, but you better check your Arabic. And then the reporter said, but you said it in English. Then he hung up the phone.
Okay. Now, at the time that that rally happened in 1999, he was the advisor to the President of the United States. Now, the Secret Service was given that, and he still remained until the end of the Clinton term involved in that administration. Now, you can blame President Clinton, but this did not, Al-Amoudi was not pushed out. He was accepted into the Republican ranks as well. So there's a bipartisan failure here. And my question is, how is this possible? And what I want you to understand is this is possible because the very people around the President, around the Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security, and those people are Muslim brothers. And when those are the people giving you advice, apparently even an Al-Qaeda guy gets a pass. And it took him getting caught in Heathrow Airport with $340,000 cash. Let me just ask you, because I suspect some of you are very commonsensical, do you think he thought he was untouchable, that he could pack $340,000 in a suitcase and fly from Libya through Heathrow to Damascus, Syria? I mean, how cocky are you to think that you can just do that? Can you imagine what did he do before that to build up to that? That was always our question. So, there he is. Well, right, and I know you all are laughing, but I always say be careful. This is a bipartisan failure. Completely bipartisan failure. Now, anybody know who that guy is?
Oh, yeah.
Anwar al-Awlaki, right? The leader of Al-Qaeda in Yemen. Well,
American traitor.
yeah, okay. So I hate to do this to you, but let me just show you something. You tell me what you think about this.
Example of somebody who was extremely successful.
Okay, there he is speaking. This is 2002. Anybody want to guess where he is right now? He's in the U.S. Capitol, speaking and offering prayers. This is 2002. Now, I'm a Marine, so I know you all are a lot smarter than me, but 2002 came after 2011. I mean, excuse me, 2001. See, I told you I'm a Marine. There you go.
Nevertheless, he never...
Okay, in the room, this guy ended up getting convicted for terrorism, involved in what became known as the Virginia Jihad plot. It was a group of guys who were doing paintball training. They had gone overseas to train with a designated terrorist group called Lashkar-e-Taiba. And that's who's in the room. Again, we're on the U.S. Capitol.
had to compromise his integrity.
One of the most important things.
Okay, who's that? That's one of the two leaders of Hamas in the United States. Jihad and Islamic. They run a front group called the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE. And we'll get into CARE shortly. Next to him is the public relations guy, Ibrahim Hooper, for CARE. So that's inside the U.S. Capitol. Does anybody think that's a problem?
Yeah.
Because I do. After this presentation at the Capitol, somebody, senior leader at DOD, thought it was such a great presentation they invited him to the Pentagon to address senior leaders there. And of course now he's in Yemen as the leader of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, and we know that he has given the green light, meaning he has approved operations. Nidal Hassan, right? The Christmas Day bomber, Batalha. Yeah, so that's that guy. So those are just so far 2 examples. How many of you think we could spend the next 4 hours just doing this? We could, but let's do a couple more. Now some people, when I first showed that, they said, well, that was back in 2002. Now it's, we've gotten much better, DHS, and really we've gotten much better. This is April 2010, and you may notice that says U.S. Capitol because this is actually the U.S. Congress's media outlet that put this out. Okay? April 2010. Now, his name's not as important as who he is. That's Anwar Hajjaj. He was the executive director of something called Taiba International. That's a designated terrorist organization. It's an Al-Qaeda front. He was the executive director of an Al-Qaeda front. He is Al-Qaeda. That's April 2010 inside the U.S. Capitol. How many of you think our new intelligence apparatus is working well? Okay. Now here's the kicker. He was also, Lashkar-e-Taiba was also a designated terrorist group by the United Nations. I mean, what do you have to do to get designated a terrorist group by the United Nations? I don't know, but it's got to be pretty bad. Sorry if I'm a little sarcastic on that. That's that guy. Well, how did they get in? Well, they got in, all of these folks got in from this group, which exists on Capitol Hill called the Congressional Muslim Staffers Association, a Muslim Brotherhood front group that operates on Capitol Hill, whose primary supporters are Andre Carson and Keith Ellison, 2 congressmen, the only 2 congressmen in the U.S. Congress who are Muslim. Now, I would say that's a problem, but that's just me. That's Siraj Wahhaj. I'm just going to give you a couple more examples so you understand. We could do this all day. Siraj Wahhaj was the first Muslim to offer prayers inside the U.S. House of Representatives. He's an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Now people will argue, well, he was unindicted. I mean, do we really want somebody associated with a terrorist bombing being the first? I mean, is this the only guy in America that we could have chosen? I'm not saying don't bring him in. I'm saying, so far, we haven't even really talked about the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm just saying, how about we keep Al-Qaeda off Capitol Hill, right? Am I missing something? Who's that? That was the chairman of the board for Hamas in the United States from 2004 2008 for CARE. CARE is Hamas. Parvez Ahmed, who's now, anybody know where he is now? He's the Human Rights Commissioner for Jacksonville, Florida. This is going on all over the country. Yes, sir.
Our president has declared that we are at war against Al-Qaeda. That's the one organization I'm aware of that he's bigger
Yes.
than, and yet he still allows this.
Yes, because we're not at war with Islam. I would argue, Hamas is a designated terrorist group. So this to me, this is really easy. Yes, ma'am.
Why aren't we doing something about it?
Now that is a silly question, ma'am. I have to tell you, I'm sorry, one of my ground rules is there are no logical questions allowed. I'm teasing you. That's a good question. Let me get through this, because I know probably in another 10 minutes you'll be so angry that... well, let me just say, I mentioned this and I'll walk you through this, but CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, it is Hamas. I'm going to give you the details on it. But do you know who the chairman of the board right now? It's no longer Parvez Ahmed. Anybody know who took over for this guy?
Barack Hussein Obama.
No.
Barack Hussein Obama.
State Senator Larry Shaw of North Carolina. Chairman of the board for Hamas. Now he's no longer your state senator, but he's still the chairman of the board for Hamas in the United States. And I'm pretty sure we're in North Carolina, so that might be something that interests you. Now, some of you may be aware that the work that Steve and I have done, Steve being the expert on Islamic law as it relates to jihad, and my area of expertise is the Muslim Brotherhood. The Center for Security Policy, and some of you may know Frank Gaffney and others like that, they built a team of people around our work, and we published this last September. Now this is, I told George, we were supposed to bring a couple boxes here if you wanted to have them. But logistical issues, we didn't get them here. And so, but this is available on Amazon, Amazon.com. And what we did in this book, and it's a pretty detailed, it's definitely a thick, has anybody read it in here or gone through it? A few of you, 2, 3 of you, 4 of you? If you read, it's really detailed, but it takes what we're talking about today and just walks you through all of this in great detail. And it also goes into other things that we can't cover in a few hours. So I recommend it. But I want to just show you this. Now, we asked, this is just April, a few months ago. And we asked these guys to do this letter for us because we were going into locales, and this kind of starts to answer your question, man, is we went into areas and we talked to sheriffs and state police superintendents and state legislators. And they'd say, wow, this is very compelling, but now, are you trying to explain to me that the entire FBI doesn't get this, but somehow you do? Like, what makes you so smart? And I say, I'm not that smart. Because as you all clearly get, what'd you call it, 101? Who said that? Yeah, this is like basic 101. This is not hard. The enemy is convincing you it's very complicated. This is so complex you can't understand it. This is so easy that an 8-year-old can get it. And I say that because I have an 8-year-old son and he gets this. This is not difficult, and I'm not kidding. So here's the point. We would go into local areas and they'd be like, yeah, we'd love to bring you in to train, but we talk to the local DHS office and they say, we don't need your training. That they got a handle on all this. So we got these guys to write a 1-page letter, and here's who they are. Anybody know General Boykin, Jerry Boykin? He's a founding member of Delta Force and commanded Delta Force during Operation Mogadishu, the Battle of Mogadishu. Yes. That's Jerry Boykin. But he was the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. General Soyster, former director of the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. Jim Woolsey, former director of CIA. And Joe Schmitz, the former Inspector General for the Department of Defense. So we realized, look, I'm just a former FBI agent. That doesn't carry a lot of weight. These guys carry weight. I just want you to see what they said about this. We want to strongly encourage you to host a national security presentation by SEG, including blah, blah, blah. While all 4 of us were in senior positions in the U.S. intelligence community and should have been aware of this information, We were not. We first heard this critical information from the two knuckleheads you're about to hear from. So, now why is this important? Because the entire purpose of what the Muslim Brotherhood does is a deception. Their whole purpose is to get into positions over a period of years to build individual relationships with individual police chiefs, leaders in the intelligence community, in the religious community, in the media, create friendships so that over time they build trust and they begin to trust them as friends, not believing their colleagues who are working with them or for them who are presenting facts. And apparently it's working because, as I've just demonstrated, I showed at least a few examples of how badly penetrated we are by guys who are obviously hostile to us. And yet we've done nothing about it. So, this is what I'm going to do right now over the next few minutes is just build you a picture of what the actual threat looks like. And it goes downhill from there, I'm sorry to say. Who said the thing like you said it, sir, that we've declared war against Al-Qaeda, right? Yeah, and so did President Bush. Here's the problem. Is Al-Qaeda an enemy of the United States?
Yes.
Yes. Are they the enemy of the United States?
No.
Because I could just ask some practical questions. Okay, if it's just Al-Qaeda, what about Hezbollah? What about Hamas? What about Hizb ut-Tahrir? What about the Muslim Brotherhood? What I want to show you today is that each of these elements, the violent jihadis, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, which I don't think I need to do much, that you guys get that they're a problem. The Muslim Brotherhood and the assorted groups that fall into that category, and we'll talk about that, openly state that they're hostile to us and that they intend to destroy us. In English, in the open. And that the nation states, Muslim states, are hostile to us. And I'm going to walk you through that right now because it's important. I want to show you a couple things. So that this is a unified movement. And if those of you have questions about like the Sunni, Shia thing, that they don't get along, and what about it, we can talk about all that, but I'm here to tell you that it's a unified movement. And the only really Muslim entity that's in the sights of the bad guys in a strategic way is Saudi Arabia. They're going after Saudi Arabia because Iran's kind of rising as the kingpin in this thing. But I don't want to get too deep, but I want to just build this picture so you all understand that it's more than just some terrorists. So let's start that. We go around the country and we've presented to law enforcement, National Guard in North Carolina. Okay? And we know that here and everywhere we go, the cops, even the federal agents that we talk to, all say if it's not Al-Qaeda, we're not working it. If it's not about shooting, somebody kidnapping, taking over a school, bombing a bus, we're not working it. I mean, they're all focused on preventing an attack. And I'm not saying that that's not important. What I'm saying is that from the enemy's perspective, from their own mouths, that's not their primary focus. Okay? The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq are not unimportant to them, but it's not their primary focus. And for us, it is our primary focus. How many of you disagree with that? Because if you disagree, please say so. I can tell you every cop, everywhere we've been, says, no, that's exactly how it is. If we work a case and it's about some guy trying to shoot something or do a suicide bombing, we work it, and if we find out he's not going to blow something up, we go on to the next one in the stack. And what we're arguing is that guy may be the most important guy specifically because he's not doing violence. And you'll understand that in a minute. My argument is this is what it looks like. And while Al-Qaeda is important, military folks that are in here, if the enemy can get us to totally focus here on this, while they also are operating over here, what does that do for us? Distracts us, it fixes us on something so that then they can come at us in other ways. Now, what I'm arguing is the Muslim Brotherhood and their movement is how they intend to defeat us. But the king the entity that is pushing the entire global movement forward is this, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, the OIC. Okay, before you walked in here today, how many of you have even ever heard of the OIC? Raise your hands. Okay, now, for those of you not looking around, there are no hands up. Now, this is important. It's important because of this. It's the largest international organization besides the United Nations. All 57 Islamic states in the world. All 57 states. Okay? Yes?
Didn't Barack Obama said that he visited 57 states?
He did, sir.
That's pretty interesting.
It's an interesting coincidence. He did say 57.
Yep.
Yep. Sure, it's just another coincidence. So there are 57 states. Now, here's why this is important. And I want you to tell me if you think this isn't pretty clear. Because people at the State Department are apparently having trouble with this. The OIC has a website. Okay? If you Google Organization of the Islamic Conference, you'll get their website. On their website, you can click. They changed their name, but I'll get to that. They recently changed their name in the last month to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Okay? Yeah, that's perfect. So why is this important? Because the OIC has a charter. And their charter in English on their website, this is not tough, this is not deep research, says that we intend to spread human rights throughout the entire world. In 1990, the OIC, at the head of state and king level of every Islamic nation in the world, put a formal treaty together, a formal agreement together, which they served to the United Nations in 1993 formally. So under the banner of the OIC, every head of state of every Islamic nation on earth served this agreement to the United Nations formally, which said, when we, the Muslim world, say human rights, we mean Sharia law. Formally served to the United Nations. So the entire world's been on notice since 1993 that when a leader from the Islamic world stands on a podium in front of the UN, in their country, the State Department, next to the state, the Secretary of State, and they say, we're here to discuss human rights and freedoms, they mean only as defined by Islamic law. And let me take it a step further. When any of these guys are talking and they use words that like justice and freedom and terrorism and tolerance, you can only process those in your brain through the filter of Islamic law. Human rights you can only understand when a leader who served a formal document to the United Nations saying so, that when we say human rights we mean Sharia, means that these definitions of these terms have to be understood in terms of Sharia. So what is the definition of terrorism in Islamic law? It's to kill a Muslim without right. So if I am a non-Muslim and you are a Muslim and I come and kill you in a particular way for whatever reason, that is terrorism. If that guy who's a Muslim kills me 10 seconds later in the exact same way, that is not a violation of Islamic law. Because I am not a Muslim. That's terrorism. So you understand. What's justice? Justice is defined under Sharia. It's when the community is under Islamic law, then you have justice. What's freedom? When they say freedom, they mean freedom from any secular legal system that's not Sharia. So when you see this nonsense on the news that what's going on in Egypt and the broader Middle East is a freedom movement led by students who organized on Twitter, that is as divorced from reality as anything you'll see, I think, in the modern age. You are watching the revolutionary movement led by the Muslim Brotherhood, who has now taken over Egypt and will take over these other countries. Who just, if you look on a map, you'll see they all happen to surround Saudi Arabia, because that's the next target. And your State Department and this administration are on national TV saying this is a freedom movement, we should support democracy. Well, it's a freedom movement, all right. But it's freedom as the Muslim Brotherhood defines it, which is freedom from secular law. Do you see how this might be problematic if we don't know this? And I think the fact that every head of state served a formal document to the United Nations is pretty solid. We've been on notice for a long time. Is that? Yeah, it's complete doublespeak. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. And of course you explained it a lot. You know, for me, watching everything that's been going on in the Middle East, all this, you know, rights stuff, you know exactly where it's coming from. But for example, this document that they presented to the UN, is there anything in there that actually says it's based on Sharia law?
Yes.
Okay.
It specifically says, it's called the Cairo Declaration. You can look it up online. And what the last two articles, which are the clearest, say, no law can be passed or enforced that contradicts the Sharia. And that Sharia is the only law recognized by the OIC. That when they say human rights, they mean Sharia law. It's crystal clear if you read it. And it's actually, sure, it's online.
Find it.
It's Cairo Declaration.
Send it out to everybody we know.
You sure can. Now here's the point. The Cairo Declaration was actually a response from the entire Muslim world to the Declaration on International Human Rights. And it's essentially what the way it does it is it says, we, the entire Muslim world at the head of state level, concur with the Declaration of International Human Rights insofar as it does not contradict Sharia, which means we, the entire Muslim world, don't agree with anything in the Declaration of Human Rights. Which is, then the last two articles say, nothing can be done that's against the Sharia, and so the affirmative and then the negative. You know, we only support laws and rights and privileges in accordance with Sharia. And for those who don't know what that means, it means non-Muslims under Sharia do not have the same rights. They have to either convert, be killed, or live as in dhimmi status, second-class citizenship, and pay a tax, which is exactly what's happening today in areas of the world, and actually in the United States in certain neighborhoods. And then you've got you know, Muslims themselves, women, homosexuals. I mean, yes, sir.
Is there an organization, implicitness and coordinated efforts by the subgroups, like OIC, and beneath that is a Muslim? Is it hierarchical? What's the structure?
We'll get into that.
Okay.
Yeah, we will definitely get into that. So does this make sense? Do you see how these entities make up almost the entire picture? Now the other part of the picture that's at the top of your screen, which for simplicity I just write PC for political correctness, but it's more than that. The collaborative effort, we used to call them collaborators, now I'm told that that's offensive. So I really don't know what you're, I'm not that smart, so I'm not sure what word to use. But let's just say people that are helping the bad guys, willingly or unwittingly. And I want to tell you, I am not saying that everyone in the government, that people in the state of North Carolina that are helping these folks, Larry Shaw knows what he's doing. He's the chairman of the board for Hamas. But I mean, I'm talking about people who are in business or religious leaders. Some of them are just trying to be nice and they're witless. I mean, something is not right. Something's not clicking. The facts are not getting into the brain housing group for them to process. And that's a problem. Because as you all are starting to see, this is not difficult. And as I like to say, if this were rocket scientists or rocket science, I wouldn't be the guy standing here. Okay? But it's because this is pretty basic. And as I start to break down the structure here, sir, you're going to see that. This stuff is knowable. So the people who are most problematic are the people on our side that are helping them, whether they know they're helping them or not. And I would argue, and this is what I started to say and what we'll talk about after the break, is this. I don't think they're the problem. I don't think the enemy is the problem. The enemy knows exactly who they are, what they seek to achieve, and how they're going to do it. Well-financed, well-organized, well-structured, and moving forward with crystal clear vision. I think the problem is us. We don't know who we are and what we stand for anymore. And I'm not trying to sound condescending to those of you in this room. I'm talking about as a nation. We seem to have lost our way. And what I mentioned to George, what I'd like to talk about after the break is some of those basic things, because if I give you nothing else this morning, if I just throw all this at you and you walk out going, holy crud, this is terrible. I want you to be able to walk out of here and at least know in very basic ways how to talk about this. I've found that the problem is a lot of people walk out and they're like, yeah, we got to go rah. And you know, when people first hear that, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You sound like that sounds like Screech. You sound like a hater. I mean, I've been called every name in the book, but that's okay so long as I bring the facts with me. And the way I'm discussing it with you here today, I'm going to try by the end, and that's why I want to give you time at the end, to learn how to talk about this, because it's really important. But does this maybe help you understand the framework for the discussion here today? This is really important because we're only focused on that. And these guys even are getting a pass from those guys. Not to mention these guys. And how do I know that? Well,
What a picture of Clinton.
does anybody know who that guy is?
Looks like Van Jones.
That's Outlawed, the head of the OIC internationally. The Secretary of State for the United States saying the Secretary of State of the United States seeks to smooth this defamation issue. What is that? This is the Islamic world under the OIC, and we already know who they are and what they do, saying they have been working for 12 years to criminalize any communication, speech, written or otherwise, that defames Islam under Islamic law, which means anything they don't like. Well, now they're pulling back, and Secretary Clinton, let me just read this. This is from Reuters, so it's fairly middle ground. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton agreed with a major global Islamic organization on Friday to pursue new ways of resolving debates over religion without resorting to legal steps against defamation. Hold right there. What I want you to understand is what came out of this is she's going to find ways outside of the legal system to begin quieting people who are defaming Islam. Now, as an American citizen, there are some red flags that go up. Because that means either through policy or bureaucratic means, they're going to find ways to take guys like me and make me go find another job. And it's not about the job, it's about getting this message out. Clinton met with Salangulu, the head of the 57-nation Organization of the Islamic Conference in Istanbul. Istanbul's in Turkey. Turkey was the seat of the Islamic Empire for almost 700 years. That was called the Ottoman Empire. There's a reason for everything they do. To help set up new international mechanisms that will affect American citizens. Think about that. To both protect free speech and combat religious discrimination around the world. Together we have begun to overcome the false divide that pits religious sensitivities against freedom of religion. We are pursuing a new approach based on concrete steps to fight intolerance wherever it occurs. Well, but this guy is the head of the organization that says its primary mission, representing every Muslim nation on earth, is to spread Sharia across the globe. Right? Let me put this together. Their mandate in English, their charter says they exist to spread human rights throughout the world. Then they define human rights in an agreement that they formally served the United Nations, where they defined human rights as Sharia, which means their official mandate is to spread Sharia around the world. I'm not sure if you're following me here, but Sharia is not constitutionally consistent, which means they seek to impose Islamic law on you, and they formally have said it. And they have also formally said they seek to criminalize hateful, intolerant, defamatory speech against Islam. Now, the Secretary of State is saying she wants to find a way outside the legal process to do this. I find that problematic. Now we can start the presentation. Just kidding. What we're going to do for the next half hour or so, as I promised, is I want to walk you through the Muslim Brotherhood. I want to walk you through their penetration here in the United States and give you enough information for you to understand we have some issues. And if I give you nothing else, I want you to be crystal clear that the Muslim Brotherhood is hostile. Because one of the recommendations we're making to Capitol Hill is it's got to be designated as a terrorist organization. And the word resistance is not even a good word. There is such a negative repulsion to that idea up in Washington. And yet around the country, most people who get this, they're like, this is easy. These guys should all be booted. Send them home. Send them back. So, the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm going to give you the Muslim Brotherhood history in 1 minute or less. Okay? We just talked about the Ottoman Empire, because I don't want to bore you, but here's the question that I can ask you that gives you everything you need to know. Why were they even created in the 1920s?
Muslim Brotherhood?
Because if you answer that question, you know that they're hostile.
Oh, that's when Turkey became Democrat or
Ding, ding,
secular.
ding. George, do we have a gift for this young lady here? Side row. Okay, that's exactly right. The Ottoman Empire, after World War I and after the Turkish Revolution, a guy named Mustafa Kemal, who took on the name Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the father of Turks, became the leader of what became the new nation-state Turkey. He became its first president, okay? Here's what he did. He dissolved the Ottoman Empire. He did away with the position of sultan. He outlawed the growing of beards, the wearing of hijab, the call to prayer. He banned Arabic script and replaced it with Latin script. He did away with the Sharia legal system and in place of it put a secular legal system. And he built an army, secular army, to protect secular Turkey. So how do you think that went over in the Muslim world after 700 years of Ottoman Empire? Yeah, not good. That's it. Right. Not good. So a few years later, outside of Cairo, Egypt, Hassan al-Banna created the Society of Muslim Brothers, the Muslim Brotherhood. Why did he create it? What's the only reason?
To return the caliphate.
To return the caliphate. The global Islamic State, which is called the Caliphate. Under which, what kind of law rules under the Caliphate? Sharia. That's it. That's why they were created. How's that? That was more than 60 seconds, might have been 80 seconds. That's all you need to know. That's why they were created to begin with. And it's why they exist today. How do we know this, John? Well, let's talk about it. Here's what Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, had to say. It's the nature of Islam to dominate, not to be dominated, to impose its law on all nations. Does everybody see this word right here? On all nations, and to extend its power to the entire planet. Is there a First Amendment protection for somebody to impose foreign law on you? No. Do you have a First Amendment protection to impose foreign law on U.S. citizens? No. The First Amendment is for what kind of protection? And you don't even need you don't need the First Amendment
Free
to know the
speech,
reason.
religion.
Right. Can they impose foreign law on you?
No.
Is that protected? No. Foreign law cannot be imposed on you. That's not a constitutional protection.
Right.
This is an Article 6 issue. Article 6 says the Constitution of these United States shall be the supreme law of the land. Done. The only reason these guys talk about First Amendment is because they know everyone in America freezes. Now we don't want to, because that's our history, that's our tradition. Rightly so. It's why one of the major reasons we were created, one of the major things the founders spent a lot of time discussing is the ability for people to worship in any way they want up until the point that their actions become what? Illegal, but not just illegal. Even if there's not a law in the book, if it bumps up against the Constitution and the basic principles outlined in the Declaration, it is not allowed. And imposing foreign law on you is not only illegal and unconstitutional, it clearly abuts the basic foundational principles of the Declaration. But it is illegal because plotting to overthrow the U.S. Constitution is a violation of federal statute. And not only that, you can also apply sedition. I believe some of them know.
And it's a global plan.
I believe some of them know. I can't get inside someone's head, but it's clear that at some point the question has to be asked, and I heard somebody put it this way recently and I liked it, is they're either dumb as a box of rocks or they know. Man, I'm not there, and this, I may be being unfair, but I don't, this is not tough stuff.
No.
This is right out in the open. And yet the question is, when we go to the State Department, you have assistant secretaries of states and their chiefs of staff who have never heard of the Cairo Declaration. You know, when Condoleezza Rice, and then recently, you know, under different circumstances than this Secretary Clinton, calling Muammar Gaddafi, saying we're going to write him up for human rights violations. Like, well, I don't think so, because the Muslim world defines human rights as Sharia. So everything he's doing is good. Now the interesting thing is the Muslim Brotherhood called on Gaddafi to be killed for violation of human rights under Sharia because he was killing Muslims without right. And that is, under Sharia, human rights violations. And he can be put to death for that. But, you know, to answer, I don't have an answer to your question. But this is very basic. Yes, ma'am, question?
Wasn't this what the United Nations is trying to do to us?
Yes, ma'am. Informal documents that they
One
are.
at a time.
But that the force behind that is the OIC.
Oh.
Yes, ma'am. So let's go. I know this is. I hate to keep giving you facts. This is the Muslim Brotherhood's official website, ikwanweb.com, in English. This is their bylaws. Now, interestingly, in April, they pulled this off their website. Now, this is a screen capture from February of 2010. We have the whole bylaws, all the bylaws, and we use it off their website to show you what's this language? It's English. This is only like a 6-page document. So it's not like you got to be, you know, spending years studying this. This is their bylaws, the Muslim Brotherhood bylaws. They give you the history, 1928, picture of Hassan al-Banna. Chapter 2. So first they give you just the general breakdown of when it was created. The very first thing, objectives and means. The Muslim Brotherhood is an international Muslim body which seeks to establish Allah's law in the land. That is why they exist, and they tell you in English on their website. So if I just stopped right here, even though it gets better, if I stopped right here, is this the organization that should be advising the U.S. government on anything? No. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to ask this. You don't have to answer right now because you might be covering it. The difference between Allah's law and Sharia's law. Are you going to?
It's the same.
Because
Sharia is Allah's law.
Here and say Allah's law is one thing, Sharia law is.
Yeah, that's a lie. I mean, I'm not saying you're lying.
Right.
They lie about that. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Trust me, we'll walk that down. So here are, if you look up here, these are the goals. And I want to focus in because this is informing people, all this, but here we get into the meat of it. Insist to liberate the Islamic nation from the yoke of foreign rule, establish the Islamic State, and do all of this globally, cooperation in accordance with Sharia. In English, crystal clear. Now here's the kicker. Do they say, hey, we're going to do this by building this massive army and invading America? No. Here's how they say these objectives to establish these things. Make every effort for the establishment of educational, social, economic, and scientific institutions, and the establishment of mosques, schools, clinics, shelters, clubs, as well as the formation of committees to regulate zakat affairs and alms. They intended to come here into the West and into the Middle Eastern countries and Islamic countries that are not abiding by Sharia and set up the framework. The Brotherhood wanted to set up the framework. So when I tell you that in the 60s, the very first national Islamic organization was set up by the Muslim Brotherhood, the Muslim Students Association in America, the very first one. And they built every one of those afterwards. Nearly every single Islamic organization in the United States today is controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood or a derivative group, like a group working in parallel with the Brotherhood. How about that? But you don't have to believe me. Let's actually look at some of the facts. But before we do that, the Islamic nation must be fully prepared to fight the tyrants and the enemies of Allah as a prelude to establishing an Islamic state. It is that crystal clear?
Yes.
Do you think this is why they pulled their bylaws off their website in April when people started going, hey, who's the Muslim Brotherhood? I would argue it's that sentence that made them want to pull this off, among other things. So what's the Muslim Brotherhood creed? By the way, is this pretty, this is their stuff. This is their founding document. Okay?
Do you have copies of that?
I can certainly, if you all don't have connection with George, if you want to pass around some list or something so people can, I know. That's George in the back there. Then I can send it to him. I can give it to him. Yeah, it's easy. This is their creed. Allah is our goal, the Messenger our guide, the Quran is our law, Jihad is our way, and martyrdom in the way of Allah our inspiration. So in case you weren't sure about what jihad was, they kind of clarify it right here. What's martyrdom?
Suicide.
Dying in the cause of Allah. Yeah. Martyring yourself in the jihad. But I want to drive this point down. What is jihad? Now, if I can show you what I've shown you about the Muslim Brotherhood's doctrine, that this is why they were created, I just showed you their bylaws, so they exist to recreate the Islamic State, impose Islamic law, and if I can show you that, like their paragraph E says, they must be fully prepared to fight the tyrants as a prelude to establishing the Islamic State, and their own creed says jihad is our way, and even though it says martyrdom in the way of Allah is our inspiration, which pretty much clarifies it for everyone, right? But if I can show you that they officially define jihad in Islamic law that they've approved, and they define jihad as warfare against non-Muslims, and then I can show you that the only entities advising our government are Muslim Brotherhood entities, have I done my due diligence to show you we got a problem?
Yeah.
Really, that four-stage little step? Okay, so we're already a couple steps into it. So let me just clarify. First of all, I would say as a pretty good example, we have documentation and recorded conversations of Muslim brothers speaking to groups of Muslim brothers here in the United States from the 1980s, where they talk about the special section. Now, we know from their earlier writings and from their history what the special section is. But just so you know, they exist here in the United States. The special section is the portion of the Muslim Brotherhood that kills people. They do assassinations, bombings, and kidnappings. It's the military work of the Muslim Brotherhood. That is inherent to the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas was created out of Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood. So when you hear people say the Muslim Brotherhood is a non-violent political organization, I always just say Hamas. Can you explain that one to me? Oh, well, Hamas is affiliated with the Brotherhood. No, they're not affiliated. Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. Well, how do you know that? Well, because in English, the Hamas charter says, we are the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. Okay? I know that's tough. I don't want to confuse you with the simple facts. Are you guys starting to see that this is a little absurd? And if I come across a little bit of sarcastic, it's because I've been doing this a long time, and it boggles my mind. But I'm here doing this in Hendersonville, North Carolina, because I think it's that important. Because if folks like you get it, and start working on this, because you got to, I believe we can turn this thing around. Because there are not many things a city council member or state representative likes or dislikes more than people banging on their door telling them they're unhappy with them. They'll do a lot of work to get that to go away. And I don't think we're doing our work to really put the pressure on the people that need to make the decisions. That's just one example. Hold that thought, man. So we got the special section as evidence of their violence. But let me go, I want to walk through this
I'll get a copy from you.
and show you something that just nails this down.
Get a copy now.
First, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood wrote a book called Kitabul Jihad, the Book of Jihad. In it, he says all Muslims must make jihad, that jihad is an obligation from Allah Almighty on every Muslim and cannot be ignored or evaded. Now, we already know how he defines jihad, that it's warfare, because he says martyrdom in the way of Allah is our inspiration. But if I can show you that this is a book of Islamic law that the Muslim Brotherhood says is good law, and they define jihad as warfare, have I not, along a linear track, just walked ourselves down, right? So let's do that. And I'm going to do it here, but I'm going to show it to you up here. This is the Umdat al-Salik. Okay? This is 14th century Islamic law. Now, I once had a 3-star general throw this across the desk at me and said, "That's Stone Age law." I said, "Really? If it's Stone Age law, sir, why is it published in Beltsville, Maryland in English and in every mosque bookstore in the United States? If it's not really that important." Does that bring a question up in your head? So, can I get inside every imam's head and say how important this book is? Okay, no. Empirically, can we say if it's printed in Maryland and in every major mosque bookstore in the United States you can walk into, here it is, and it's on Amazon.com? Do you think it's maybe important to them? Because it was published for English-speaking Muslims in America. Still relevant, I'm going to argue. But that's not even the point. Here's the point. All I need to do for the purposes of what we're doing is to show you the Muslim Brotherhood says this is good law. And then show you that the Muslim Brotherhood is advising the U.S. government. And then that pretty much paints a bleak picture. However, I also want you to see that Al-Azhar University, the most preeminent school of Islamic jurisprudence in the world, and the oldest, it's the gold standard for Islamic law, says this is good law. There is no objection to printing it and circulating it. That means for the entire Sunni Muslim world, which is 90% of the Muslim world, this is good law. But I don't need to prove that, although I just did. I just need to show you the Muslim Brotherhood says this is good law. Now, this is a certification from Al-Azhar. Has anybody ever heard of Al-Azhar in Egypt? A couple head nods. This is the King Daddy, and this brings up one other point, is that we are talking about jurists, Islamic legal scholars, and judges, Qadi judges. These are not pastors, priests, and rabbis. Maybe it would be helpful if I do this. All of Islam, to include in first grade textbooks, defines itself, not the way John Guandola does it. They define themselves as a complete way of life. Islam is a complete way of life. Social, cultural, military, religious, political, all wrapped up into one, governed by Islamic law, which means the law controls any religious aspect of Islam. That law becoming law here in the United States is what I, and some of you in this room, swore or took an oath to protect and defend against ever becoming law here. So there is no constitutional protection for this. But this is a legal issue, not a freedom of religion issue. But they have got us bogged down in the First Amendment because they know exactly how to do that. Well, let's go a little further. And what is this? Well, this is a page, a certification from the president of the International Institute of Islamic Thought, IIIT, and the Islamic Fiqh Academy at Jeddah. And he's signing this as the president of the Fiqh Council of North America. IIIT and Fiqh Council, two of the largest Muslim Brotherhood entities in North America. And I'll prove that to you in a minute. But here's why this is important. This is like, calling it a think tank is not enough. It's really a strategy node for the Muslim Brotherhood internationally. That's what IIIT is. The Fiqh Council of North America is the council of legal jurists in North America that ensure that everything the Muslim Brotherhood does is in accordance with Sharia. That's their entire purpose. And this guy, Tahal Al-Wani, was the president of both. Now he's also signing as a member of the Islamic Fiqh Jurisprudence Academy of Jeddah. So what do we know now about this book? We know that Al-Azhar, meaning the entire Sunni Islamic legal world, says this is good law. Saudi Arabia says it's good law, and the Muslim Brotherhood says it's good law. But for the purposes of this, we only need to know that the Muslim Brotherhood says it's good law. Okay? So, boom, boom, there. So how does this book define jihad? Just so nobody thinks I've done anything untoward here, sir, will you just read this highlighted part right there? This comes from Book O, Justice. As loud as you can, please.
Okay. Jihad means to war against non-Muslims and is etymologically derived from the word muhadada, signifying the warfare to establish the religion.
Yes. Warfare against non-Muslims. Now that brings up a question. And we'll get into a couple pieces of this. The Islamic advisors to our government leaders say that jihad is what?
Spiritual religion.
Say it a little louder, ma'am.
A spiritual war.
Spiritual struggle. It's like internal yoga. Except we have a problem here. There is no Islamic law ever in the last 1,400 years published anywhere on the earth that says that. All Islamic law only defines jihad as warfare against non-Muslims. Now you can say, I didn't bring the full collection, but I brought a few. This is one of the oldest books of Islamic law translated into English in the 50s. And just for the purposes of making a point, the very first chapter is entitled what?
The conduct of war.
The conduct of war. And chapter 2 is entitled
On the conduct of the army in enemy territory.
On the conduct of the army in enemy territory. This is the oldest book of Islamic law. The funny thing is, if I take a 7th grade textbook, the most prominent textbook used in Islamic schools in the United States, guess what? How do you think this defines jihad? As a spiritual struggle, as yoga? Or, I know, my sarcasm sometimes gets the best of me. Or does it define it as, one more time, sir, right there, just that sentence.
The word jihad is most often associated with the act of physically confronting evil and wrongdoing.
Wow, so apparently our Secretary of fill in the blank is too stupid to learn something that a 7th grade Muslim child in an American Islamic school learns. That jihad is physically confronting evil. And by the way, on that same page, I'll read it, but if you don't trust me, we can get our friend here to, what's your first name, sir?
John?
John, we can get John to read it. If anyone dies in a jihad, they automatically go to paradise. A shaheed or martyr is described this way by Allah. Don't think that those who are killed in Allah's cause are dead. No, they're alive, finding their bounty in the presence of the Lord. Now we could go on. We could go on and read the portions where it says that why don't we just have a little fun here? Because here's my point. If this is what's being taught in 7th grade, how hard is this really to understand? First of all, this chapter is entitled, What is an Islamic State? And under it, it says this: the way known as Islam is a complete code of life. There is no separation of masjid and state, for the object of the Islamic State is the establishment of the deen of Allah, the establishment of the Sharia. The basis of the legal and political system is the Sharia of Allah. Well, that's funny. I thought the basis of our legal and political system was the Constitution under the framework of the Declaration. Apparently I need to go back to history class. The duty of Muslim citizens is to be loyal to the Islamic State. Okay. being taught to American citizens who are Muslim in Islamic schools. This is a junior high school text in English. So do you see that there's actually, from the 9th or 10th century to the 14th century to the textbook in America in English, there's no real difference, is there? It's kind of interesting, because how is it then that Islamic advisors to government officials say that it's a spiritual struggle? Because here's what I'd like to maybe throw out there. If they're not telling our government leaders this, that this is the only definition in Islamic law, it means, one, they don't know it, which means they're not competent for the very thing they're being paid for. And they should be. Okay? But if they do know it and they're not telling them, maybe that's a little more nefarious, and maybe it indicates something else. You see how there really isn't a third option. Am I missing a third option? Like, it's confusing? Because anywhere you go off the mark and say, well, it's confusing to them, well, then they're not. Why are we paying them to be an Islamic expert? Just a thought. Something to throw out there. What else do we find in this book approved by the Muslim Brotherhood? Well, funny, there's a section on lying. Now what's interesting, I find, is that when you look at Islamic law, let me get someone else. Sir, would you help me? Would you be willing to help me? Just, if you could just out loud read that section. This is Book R, holding one's tongue. What's that word?
Lying.
And what's that phrase?
Permissible lying.
Permissible lying.
Oh my goodness.
So, this is an explicit statement that lying is sometimes permissible for a given interest. It is permissible to lie if attaining the goal is permissible, and obligatory to lie if the goal is obligatory.
Wow.
Now, let me go back to jihad.
Sure.
Go back to jihad. 1 second, sir.
Sure.
And I'm going to read some of the subsections. The obligatory character of jihad. Who is obliged to fight in jihad? Objectives of jihad. The rules of warfare. Truces. The spoils of battle. Non-Muslim subjects in the Islamic State. The non-Muslim poll tax. You see that there's actually law about all this. Now, they say in their 7th grade and 1st grade textbooks that Islam is a complete code of life governed by Islamic law. It's not me saying it. This is Islamic law that they say is good Islamic law. And I've just read you what it says. How many are concerned that the people that agree with this are advising the President of the United States? I'm going to go ahead and raise my hand just for sake of it. Okay. Is anybody, was that difficult, what we just did, that little exercise? It took us 24 minutes to walk that down. So let me, before we break, I want you to walk you down about what the Muslim Brotherhood of the United States, how they got here, a little bit of the evidence. We're going to break, and we're going to come back, and before we break, we'll take a few questions. Ma'am, who had their hand up before? Let me answer your question before I start this.
My problem in discussing this with friends, we're Christians, and we often do not obey Jesus Christ, the Christian canon.
Okay.
So these are Muslims.
Sure.
Is there a moderate Muslim that does not obey these tenets, which are religious, military, and political, which Christianity is not? We have separate Christianity and our Constitution. They're separate. This is all together, political, military, and religion.
Correct.
So we want to respect their religion because of our First Amendment. But is there a moderate Muslim who does not want jihad?
Okay, so her question was, did everybody hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So, and then sir, remind me you had a question, but let me get to that. Her question was just, are there moderate Muslims? There are, in my experience, plenty of people who self-identify themselves as Muslim who have a moderate worldview, yes. The problem is there is no such thing, and has never been any such thing as a moderate Islam. I don't know how you water this down. And you see the problem with, one of the things we were talking about last night is the idea of, reforming Islam. In Islam, the legal scholars have closed the door in Sunni Islam, which is 90% of the Muslim world, on any relook or revision or review of the law or any of the core texts, the Quran, the Hadith, the Sirah, any of them. So to go back and question something about what Muhammad did or said, to question anything in the Quran, in other words, to question God, is a capital crime. That's why you don't see it. And when you do see it, you don't see it long. Those people go away. This is the problem. It will always be the problem. And it cannot change because of the nature of what it is. Because this, we're not going to be able to get into it, but I will give it to you in 60 seconds or less. The Quran itself is 114 chapters or surahs. Okay? It's not arranged chronologically. It's arranged by size. The very first chapter is just the short Bismillah, the introduction, and then the second chapter is essentially the largest. And pretty much, relatively speaking, it goes by size until the 114th surah, which is the smallest. Because of the contradictions in the Quran follows chronologically what Muhammad did. When Muhammad was in Mecca for 13 years and first got the revelations in a cave by himself, Muhammad got these revelations. When he went to the Jewish and Christian scholars, he was rebuked completely. You're not a prophet. We're not expecting you. He's rebuked. So for 13 years, he's in Mecca, and all the verses are peaceful. And in the entire 13 years, he converts, according to Islamic sources, somewhere between 200 and 250 people in 13 years. The first 6 or 7 years, he converts about 6 or 7 people, according to Islamic sources. Okay? Then he is asked to go to Medina, where he becomes a political civil leader. He starts making agreements with tribes. He raises up an army, lots of conversions to Islam, and they go back and they sack Mecca. And as the history goes and as the revelations over the next 10 years proceed, they become more and more violent. So you get, in the Mecca period, meaning the peaceful period, no jihad. In the early Medinan period, you get what they call defensive jihad, which is not what we call defensive jihad. Then you get offensive jihad for limited means, and then offensive jihad forever, as a requirement, an obligation for all Muslims for all times until the entire world is conquered for Islam. Now, 3 times in the Quran, the concept of progressive revelation or abrogation is in the Quran, which means it comes from Allah. It's the direct revelation, uncreated word of Allah. It says that whatever came later abrogates whatever came earlier, which means the last chapter, Surah 9, to talk about jihad, fight and slay the unbelievers wherever you find them and lie in wait for them in every stratagem of war, that controls the last word on the jihad. Surah 9:5 and Surah 9:29. They control for pagans and for Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians. So the pagans, you either convert or die. For Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, you get that third option of living as a third-class citizen, as a dhimmi, and paying a tax, a dhimmi tax. So when you hear people say, oh, the Jews and the Christians, they lived wonderfully alongside the Muslims, in Andalus, it was great. It was great. Jews weren't allowed out in the rain because, God forbid, rain touched the Jews. It goes down their body and goes down the sidewalk, and a Muslim steps on that. You understand? That's not equality in the system. And I'm just giving that as a little example. Okay? So, understanding that what chronologically came later overrides everything else, you understand that jihad is a permanent obligation for all time until the world is controlled by the caliphate, which is also an Islamic law, under which Sharia is the law of the land. That is it. That is Islam. It is not a religion. There is no Islamic scholar who has ever written or said Islam is a religion alone. It's never been said. So, am I okay with somebody getting on their knees and worshiping? Absolutely, all day long. The minute they seek to impose Islamic law in any way, that's the action that the founders and our law says, that's where you put the tab on it. Because that is not only unconstitutional, it's illegal. Is that a good enough 1 minute kind of? You have to understand that to understand. The last word in the Quran on relations between Muslims and non-Muslims is Surah 5. Take not the Jews and Christians as your friends, they are but friends of one another. It's the last word in the Quran, which means it overrules, tolerate all religions, all the other things that are in there. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask, isn't that, aren't they being treasonous in this?
There certainly are. There are arguments being made that legally, this is under federal code, conspiracy to overthrow the U.S. government, sedition, treason laws may come into effect. Certainly sedition comes into the sedition laws. We charge the blind sheikh, Abdurrahman, with sedition in New York. Abdurrahman, yeah. So, yes.
When you were at the Women's Club, you made the point that there's a Muslim gentleman who has come on TV talking about, he lives in California, talking about creating moderate Muslims, reforming. And you pointed out that his funding comes entirely from non-Muslims.
Correct.
The Muslims won't touch
That's what we're saying. I mean, you see a lot of Quranis, which are people who only believe in the Quran and not in the Hadith and the Sirah, and they're living in the West. People are like, well, we should listen to the Quranis. I'm like, well, do you know why they're living in the West? Because they get killed in Islamic countries. Because again, they're saying, we're just going to listen to the Quran. And we're going to pick the peaceful versions, the peaceful verses, and that's going to guide us. And I'm all good with that. Don't get me wrong. I'm all good with that. But just the reality is they're getting killed in Islamic countries.
They may think that way, but the reason they don't come out and say this is a terrible thing after the 9/11. No Muslims stood up and said, "Oh, these are terrible people. They don't represent my brand of Muslim."
Right.
Is because they could have been killed.
As a matter of fact, if you talk one-on-one with colonels and lieutenant colonels from foreign countries, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, Kuwait, they'll tell you Osama bin Laden is a much better Muslim than I am. That's just a data point. Yes, ma'am.
Is it Zuhdi Yasser?
Zuhdi Yasser, yeah, in Arizona.
How does he fit in?
I think that's who she was referring to.
I think she was.
Yeah. I mean, I think Zuhdi is an important guy because I think Zuhdi's for real. And Zuhdi's a patriot. He's trying to do
Is he for real?
Yeah, he's trying to do the right thing. But again, he has admitted publicly, so I'm not saying anything that he hasn't already said. He doesn't get the VAT, 99 to 100% of his funding is coming from the Jewish and Christian community because they like his message. But unfortunately, that is not what Islam is.
How long is he going to last?
So long as guys like that draw our attention there, they'll allow him to work, forever. We've had these discussions. I mean, he's going through. This is a lot. I mean, he grew up. His upbringing was treat everybody right, do unto others, and he was raised in a good home. Fortunately, he was not raised according to Islamic doctrine. At some point, we need to kind of unvarnish this thing. I'm telling you, we're in a bad way. Your national security decision-making loop is being controlled by the other side. This is why these things are happening. We're saying these things about Egypt. It's why the policies towards Iraq and Afghanistan are upside down. And we wrote the constitutions for Iraq and Afghanistan. We did, our State Department. That makes Sharia the law of the land. We created Islamic states in their constitution, which means, why are we fighting? What are we fighting for? And I briefed a 4-star general a couple years ago. I made that observation. I can tell you the blood drained out of his face when he realized that was true. So I was like, so why are we sending men and women to fight and die over there?
John, when you have these discussions with these, obviously these people breathe rarefied air in the system.
Right.
How do they respond? I mean, do they throw you out? Does the blood drain? What's the...
Some of them, a small number. Now, on Congress, we've been having actually a pretty surprising impact. But the other side's working very hard. I'll give you one example because I do want to take a break. When we got a particular congressman to get this, and then he went to the Peter King hearing and grilled somebody, and then a couple of them grilled, like the director and the attorney general, in open hearings. It was very entertaining for us. But the guy who was at the Peter King hearing, we were watching it live I think actually that one we watched from our office on live C-SPAN. The hearing ends, within 40 seconds, I get a text on my BlackBerry from the congressman, and he said, they are all over me already. And I was like, welcome to the game, sir. Talk to you later. Boom. Welcome to the game. If you're going to do this, especially in the hearing room, he said it was like, they went right to him. And they're after him. And now they're all over him. The Muslim Brotherhood, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, CARE, the representatives from Islam, I mean, all of them. Boom. So, yes, sir. Last question, then we'll break.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about, what's happening right now with the, the financial. A lot of it maybe is just an illusion to divert us from what's really going on with all this other stuff and the New World Order. Is that what this is?
All right, let me say that after the break, when we go through, we're going to go through a few documents because there's still about 10 minutes of stuff I want to give you before we go to the other part. And I will briefly address that so you understand. So is 15 minutes or 10? What do you guys want to take?
Just long enough to have a cigarette, that's all.
10 minutes. Take 10 minutes to watch. Come back in 10 minutes.
I remember hearing that in high school. I never.
Okay. Everything we're talking about in here today is in here with the documents and with a pretty serious appendix with background documentation. And it's all footnoted pretty in great detail. The other thing is, there is a DVD coming out maybe as early as next week, which is about an 80-minute presentation that I did in Charlotte, actually, North Carolina. Excuse me. And it takes everything you're seeing here and kind of packs it in to a non-stop 80-minute boom. So the reason I did it was I'm hoping, and our group's hoping, that it'll be used especially by, religious groups and Tea Party people and like your groups, the Republican Women's Club and whatever, or, it's produced by Act for America. And those of you who don't know Act for America, I do encourage you, if you don't want to get involved with them, to at least occasionally go to their website, actforamerica.org. But that DVD will be available through their website in the near future. And I'm literally think it's going to be in the next week or so. I just haven't gotten confirmation about a date. It could be a month, could be 2 weeks, whatever. So those two items are out there. So like the question about what else should I read, or what should I read, I'll give you. George, are we going to have packets for people? Were we able to get that reproduced?
I only have a few. So
okay.
That's why we need your emails. We can email.
Because we can email you. It was a small 6-page packet, but the point is it's to give you some basic information. One of them's like we do a 1-page summary of the threat that kind of explains all this in a 1-page summary. As you can imagine, we did that for members on Capitol Hill because 1 page is about all they were wanting. They really just wanted, give it to me succinctly, lay it out there for me. So that's that. Was there any other question about that? And then how to get in touch with me at the end, I'll give you our website. It's just strategicengagement.org. Strategicengagement.org. And I'll put it up at the end of the presentation to kind of give you that. Okay. While I'm just going to get up online here. I want to show you something. Not right this second, but in a moment. What other questions kind of are lingering from the first part of this? Yes, sir.
I'm having trouble here in finding a systematic way in describing this. In other words, I don't think all Muslims are bad people and trying to take over and make all I see. I don't know whether it's, and I don't want to be politically correct. I could care less about that. But is it Islamic jihadists or are they the bad guys? Some characterization, some categorization of the various elements of the Muslims in general.
Okay, that's fair. I said it to a couple of people during the break. Nowhere in this presentation, or nowhere if you kind of follow us around, will you ever hear us say all Muslims are, and then fill in the blank. I think, honestly, I think that's ignorant to say about any group of people. But what you can say, and what I did say to the group earlier, is that Islam, the doctrine of Islam, is clear. Okay? Whether somebody adheres to Islam and Islamic law or not is a matter of their own individual choice to a point, depending on where they are. What we do know is that around the world, when the community, the nation, wherever they are, when their area becomes under the control of the Brotherhood or other people that are adhering to Islamic law, they either have to leave, be punished, or adhere. And in most cases, they're stepping in line. And that's the problem. That's my problem. I have a problem with that. Because then when you're making national security decisions, I'm not going to base my national security decisions based on the fact that I know, and I do, people who say I'm Muslim, and they're nice people. That's not how we do national security. That you may be right, and I think you are right. But as a national security advisor, as I said earlier, my job, God bless you, is not to tell somebody that guy is or isn't a good Muslim. That's not my job. My job is to advise leadership on national security issues. My area of expertise happens to be on the Islamic movement, as well as there are other pieces to it, but you know, the left, working with the left and leftist groups and stuff like that. But we're talking here today about the Islamic movement. And if 100% of the people we're fighting say we are fighting, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood or Al-Qaeda or any of those, we do what we do in accordance with Islamic law in order to impose Islamic law. All I'm saying is we're 10 years in, and you could argue we're 30 years in, to a war, and nobody in the national security apparatus, in DOD, FBI, DHS, is even, there's not 5 people in a room somewhere in your government where they break open Islamic law, read it, study it, and determine what are the strategic implications to the fact that Al-Qaeda is correctly citing Islamic law. That's a problem. And so, yes, what you're saying is valid, but it has no, we argue it has no relevance in the national security realm. Because the doctrine of Islamic law is what it is. And it is hostile, and it does command them to do the things that Al-Qaeda says they're supposed to do. You know, one of the things that Osama bin Laden was supposedly hammered for by the Muslim community, and the Muslim Brotherhood people will tell you this, see, Osama bin Laden, he's not a scholar, so he can't issue a fatwa. Remember the 96, if any of you remember, in 96, he said we are at war with the United States, and boom, he laid it out. Well, he didn't actually issue a legal ruling. He simply told the Muslim community, this is your obligation under Islamic law. You are required under Islamic. He didn't. He just said, this is what the law says, and we are required to adhere to it. Any Muslim can do that. Remind you of your obligations. So I think until that you're talking about something that is absolutely critical to understand when you talk about this stuff. As you can say, look, I'm not here to judge any individual for whatever they want. I'm here to tell you that when Al-Qaeda quotes Islamic law, they are accurately citing Islamic law in furtherance of the actions they're taking. That right there completely changes the nature of our understanding of this war. Yes, ma'am.
The last time I heard you speak, you mentioned in your opening statement that they were as close as 14, 18 miles from here. Were you talking about the Muslim Brotherhood?
Yeah, I mean, Muslim-controlled entities. I mean, you certainly got them in Asheville. And you've got some home, just from my understanding of what's going on here, there's at least one home mosque. I don't have a location of it, so I won't use that in the example. But you have Islamic centers here, you have mosques here. And what I'm going to show you in a couple minutes is that any and all Islamic centers, the Islamic center of and fill in the blank, those are all controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. All of them. All Islamic societies, the Islamic Society of fill in the blank. Islamic Society of Virginia, Islamic Society of Greater Charlotte, I mean, any of those are all Muslim Brotherhood entities, because they're all subsidiaries of the Islamic Society of North America, which is the largest Muslim Brotherhood entity.
What can we do as citizens to prevent this?
Okay, ma'am, hold that. We're getting there.
Okay.
Yes, sir?
I wanted to ask you, what you presented is pretty grim. Is there any country around the world that you would point to that maybe is handling things better than the United States? And part two, you obviously love the United States and are a patriot and everything, but if you had to leave, is there somewhere that you would
That's wow. I'll answer that briefly. There's nowhere I'm going to go, because I think we're going to stand and fight. That's my attitude, and I actually am not sure that there is any place to go right now. Is there an example I'd look to? The only one I'd even begin to point to is Australia, but they have a lot of problems, but they have a very different attitude there than anywhere else in the world. I mean, China handles this very differently. You may have noticed when the Uyghurs rise up, the Uyghurs are a group of Muslims. What did they do? They went in there and they shot them all and they left. That was what they did. I'm not commenting on their tactics. However, China, they've got hundreds of millions of Muslims that they're going to, God bless you, that, they need to make sure don't try to take over their country.
Would you say Australia is handling things better than the United States?
I would. They're more realistic. There seems to be a logical process going on in people's brains that seems to be largely absent here. How's that? I'm trying to do it in a thoughtful way, because I think, if I just say, they're all morons, I mean, that's not true. There are a lot of patriots up on Capitol Hill. There are a lot of patriots in the State Department. There are a lot of patriots at DHS and FBI. But the leadership is just not doing what they need to be doing. And there are a variety of reasons for that. I'm actually putting together a paper where I think I'm up to like 18 or 19 reasons why, to your question earlier, why aren't they getting it? I mean, there are a lot of reasons. I mean, some are not bright, some are cowards, some are just worried about the next promotion. But that's not all of them. Some are bright patriots.
Would you say that most of them are Democrats?
I would not.
Who knows?
I would not say that. I would say that we're having a lot of trouble getting people of the Democrat Party to sit down and listen to our presentation. That's true. They won't even come into the room. Our reputation precedes
I'm
them.
saying the right thing.
But I will also say the leadership of the Republican Party right now is no better than the leadership of the Democrat Party on this issue. Currently.
Republican only in the
Yes, sir. I'm talking at the national level, by the way. Yes,
In the interest of full disclosure, I am a Democrat, have been a Democrat for
yes, sir.
Oh, we're
60
sorry.
years.
I'm sorry.
Okay? I have a lot of opinions, I won't go into it, but when people on the right, okay, accuse me of being not patriotic,
Did I just do
not
that?
being an
No.
American, not you, sir,
Okay.
okay? You haven't done it yet.
Okay.
Part of some
I
leftist conspiracy
I won't
because
do
we disagree with them,
Right.
you lost me.
Do you think I lost you?
No,
Okay.
that
In general.
loses me, okay? I'm here with open ears to hear
Good.
what you have to say.
Good. Is there anything I've said that you think is factually incorrect?
I have one bothersome thing, just very quickly, okay?
I tell you what, let's do this. Are you going to go to lunch with us? Would you be willing to go to lunch with us?
If you'll listen to my side of the story.
Absolutely. And let me say something, since I mentioned it earlier. When I said, I have an area of expertise in the leftist movement, that's what I meant. And I can show you at the local and state level where Marxist groups and leftist groups are specifically working with the Islamic movement, as well as the international level. So it's not a hypothetical or I try to keep my opinions, with the exception of a couple sarcastic comments, out of this. And I think the problem is I don't believe. I've met a lot of people around this country. I've briefed state legislators on both sides of the aisle. And I think at the state and local level, which is why I'm here in Hendersonville, because men like you are the ones who will listen to, regardless of party. I'm telling you, at the national level, my experience is the leadership of both parties, they do not want to deal with a significant national security threat that affects you and me and our families. And that's a problem. I personally don't care what party you're from. This is not about being in a political party. This is about being an American and defending those principles that were laid out in the Declaration and that were initially enshrined in the Constitution as part of our legal system. And I just think we are doing a terrible job. I would love to have, I'm telling you, at the U.S. Congress level, we have never, with the exception of one person, there's not a Democrat that sat in and listened to us. They haven't even walked in the room. At the state level, there have been plenty across the country. Because at the state level, there seems to be, at least from my experience, a very smaller disagreement between people who are just neighbors than there is at the national level. Now, in some areas, that's not true. Some areas there are big disagreements, same ones that are, but at the national level, from my own personal and professional perspective, neither party represents me at the national level. And I would argue that's why this thing called the Tea Party and these other groups are exploding. It's not just the Tea Party, it's all kinds of groups blossoming around the country who are looking at what's going on, not just on this issue, but on other national security issues and other important issues facing the country. So I'm glad you're here. Hold, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Well,
you have a question?
I just wanted to make a statement right at this moment, just quickly.
Okay.
I just want you to know that this Tea Party, the Blue Ridge Tea Party Patriots, is made up of Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. We are not. We're all conservative. And I just wanted to make that statement so that...
That's fine, and thank you for sharing.
That's understood.
Here's what I'd like to do, because I think we have, you wanted to end about 20 of, right? So you have time to clean up, and is that about right? In other words, about an hour, 50 minutes?
Yeah, the appointment over at the restaurant for those who are going to be going is 12:45.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is I do want to walk through this, not this, I want to walk through a few things, and then I just want to talk to you about some founding issues and how the founders looked at this, and maybe how we can contrast this. And then I want to just give you some thoughts about going forward. Your question, ma'am, what do we do? And I'd really like to get to that here pretty shortly. So let me very briefly give you some meat to what I said in the first 15 minutes. Because when you make a statement, as you can imagine, this comes across to people that haven't studied this. If I say nearly every Muslim organization in the United States is a part of the Muslim Brotherhood movement, that's a pretty strong statement. As a matter of fact, that's factually true, and what I want to do is start walking you down. The Brotherhood came to the United States and initially settled in Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan in the 1950s. And there's evidence they were here in the 30s, but I want you to think about that. They came here in an organized fashion in the 1950s. In other words, they came here with a thoughtful purpose of how they were going to do it. Now, you read their bylaws, right? And how they were going to do it. They were going to set up these scientific educational organizations, trade organizations, all these things. And so they came to the United States and they set up the Association for Muslim Social Scientists, Association of Muslim Scientists and Engineers, the Islamic Medical Association, the Islamic Teaching Association. All these groups were all set up by the Muslim Brotherhood. The very first one was set up at the University of Illinois, Urbana in 1962, was the Muslim Students Association. And that was the very first Muslim organization nationally in the United States. Was set up by the Muslim Brotherhood. Think about that.
Isn't that where Barack Obama came from?
That was in 62. So if my math is correct, that is approximately 50 years that they've been doing this. So you can see how that slow roll works. Okay? All right. Now, by the late 70s, early 1980s, they were on, the majority of their organizations were on the East and West Coast, and just about every state in between. But let's just start with the Muslim Students Association, a Muslim Brotherhood entity, the first one in North America, in the United States, first national entity. It's on every major college campus in the country. Hundreds of chapters for the purpose of recruiting for the Muslim Brotherhood and for the Jihad. But yet, when they get challenged, well, they're young, cute guy, cute girl, normally running. They say, this is ridiculous. We don't even know what the Muslim Brotherhood is. Ridiculous. And yet, we have them on, I mean, I could pull it up on YouTube, and the Muslim Brotherhood, Muslim Student Association Pledge, which oddly enough sounds exactly like the Muslim Brotherhood Creed. I'll pull that up in a few minutes if you like. Anyway, that, just so you know, that organization alone has massive impact on college campuses. Massive impact because they're involved in all kinds of activities on campuses. And it's all about controlling the message about how Islam is discussed. Now I'm going to show you a video in a few minutes as we talk about constitutional issues to show you why this is problematic. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to get into how do we know all these details. So this is Musa Abu Marzouk in a jump shoot in the Alexandria jail in the 1990s. He was the leader of Hamas in the United States. Okay? Now he was partnered up. There's his, obviously he's a designated terrorist, and there's the order from the Treasury Department, specially designated terrorist because he's the leader of Hamas. Okay? Now, he was partnered up with Ismail el-Barassi. Both of them lived in Virginia, in Falls Church, right outside of D.C. It's the leader of Hamas, living right outside of D.C. You may know this story, and some of you that have seen it before know it. In 2004, in August, he and his family are driving across Chesapeake Bay Bridge in Maryland. Baltimore County cops are rolling up behind him, and they see his wife, who's in hijab, filming the support structures of the bridge. They say, well, that's weird. And as they drive past the car, she pulls the camera down, and then as they go by, they see that she brings the camera back up. Now, so for a cop, that's an investigative clue. Okay? So they back down and they pull him over. The Maryland Transportation Authority, who owns Chesapeake Bay Bridge, the cops, they come, and then the lieutenants come, and then the FBI comes, and you get all this rigmarole on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Why? Because the driver is identified as Ismail el-Barassi, wanted on a material witness warrant out of a case in Chicago, a Hamas case involving Musa Abu Marzouk, the leader of Hamas. So the FBI Washington field office raids his home in Falls Church in Annandale, Virginia, 2004. And in his basement, they find a sub-basement. And in the sub-basement, they find the archives of the Muslim Brotherhood in North America.
Oh.
So we actually get thousands of their internal documents written back into the 70s all the way through, some of them through the 90s. This is discovered in 2004. Now, there are other strategic documents that we have discovered overseas, raid in Switzerland in 2001, and other places. But for time's sake, I want to focus on just this and let you know that on any of these points, if you wanted to say, well, come on, I mean, that's one document, I could say I have 20 others that nail this down. But I'm just going to give you enough to show you that this is real, that we have all this documented. Is that fair? And then again, anything you want, I'm going to give you some places to go that might be helpful for you to learn more. So, one of the documents found in the raid is this one. Now, I want to introduce this by saying there was a trial. Have any of you heard of the Holy Land Foundation trial? Raise your hand. 2? George, I know, so 3. Okay. The United States versus the Holy Land Foundation trial was the largest terrorism financing and Hamas trial ever successfully prosecuted in U.S. history. It was adjudicated in Dallas, Texas in November 2008. And you guys never heard of it. Well, don't feel bad, because if we were in a room with 100 cops, probably 10 of them would have heard of it. And if it were a room of 100 FBI agents, maybe 15 of them would have heard of it. And I think that's a problem, because it's the largest terrorism financing and Hamas trial in U.S. history. And what it did, what the evidence laid out was, there is an Islamic movement in North America led by the Muslim Brotherhood, and that all these organizations are a part of it. CARE is a Hamas entity. ISNA and NATE, the two largest Muslim Brotherhood front groups, are funding this Hamas movement because Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood, remember? All this was laid out in court. And yet, when we have doing our presenting, how does the Muslim Brotherhood respond? Come on, it's a bunch of papers found in some guy's garage, some random guy, who knows? Okay, I'm going to review this for you just so this is a good talking point for you. The evidence I'm going to present to you was found in the home of a senior Hamas operative, Ismail al-Barasi, who was business partners and partnered with the leader of Hamas in the United States. These are the archives. These documents were found among the archives in a secreted basement in his home, among thousands of documents, tapes, pictures, videos that were found by the FBI, entered into evidence in the largest Hamas and terrorism financing trial in U.S. history, and the defense attorneys stipulated to the fact that these are what they purport to be, which are strategic Muslim Brotherhood documents, written by senior Muslim brothers in the United States. So to say this is not what it is just wrong. You're wrong. And you can never be right. You're legally and factually wrong. Is everybody with me on that? It's pretty solid, isn't it? But they're still on the radio saying, oh, come on, it's just some guy. They found documents, some guy's basement. Well, it's not just some guy. You're with me on this, right?
Okay.
Okay. Why is this important? There's the stamp from the trial. This was stipulated to. Here's the English translation. This is the Muslim Brotherhood strategic document for how they are going to take the United States and North America down. The general strategic goal for the group in North America, it's dated 1991. It's written by Muhammad Akram, the number 2 guy in Hamas, senior Muslim brother in the United States. Dated 1991. Are you with me? And what's it say? Well, this, I'm going to have to, for time's sake, organizations. That entire process of how they settled here in the United States is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan, where the Muslim Brotherhood must understand their work in America, is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers so that it is eliminated and God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. A civilization jihadist process, a grand jihad in sabotaging its miserable house, that's our house, by their hands. By whose hands? Ours. Okay, now I'm going to do a quick demonstration to show you how this works, because this sounds pretty outrageous, right? That they're going to get our leadership to do their bidding for them. That sounds ridiculous. Except now, as you're going to see, what I said earlier is that the very people advising us are Muslim brothers. So at least they're in a position to do this, but are they really doing it? Okay? Well, the way they do it, and I want to revisit this, I mentioned earlier, is they create personal relationships with police chiefs, with members of Congress, with leaders of the religious community, Jewish and Christian and others, with people in the media, with people in law enforcement and intelligence community, with the entire political world, at different levels, state legislators. Now they create a personal relationship. For those of you not aware of what counterintelligence is, or maybe have a passing understanding, this is exactly how you recruit people. It's exactly how you recruit people in the counterintelligence world, which is why we argue with DOD, or at least make the argument that this is much more a counterintelligence problem than it is a counterterrorism problem. I think we're pretty good in the U.S. on the guys that want to shoot us, blow us up. We're doing okay. We're certainly good at waging war, right? We're good at that. We have a great military to do that. What we're not good at is this, because this is tough stuff. This is, how do you stay on guard? We used to have a saying in the Bureau, anytime someone approaches you, guard up, and they're a potential target or a potential source, always. You don't know this person. That's not how we're doing it today, across the board. Somebody comes up, they know that if they give to your campaign as a state legislator, as a national candidate, they know that gets them invited to certain closed-door events. And then they just start showing up, and they never really do anything for a while until they've built that trust. And then they have the ability to start befriending you. And the richer they are, the more access they seem to be getting. So you've got very wealthy people. Now at the state level, like in certain states we've looked at, you'll get a husband-wife, a guy who's a Muslim brother and his wife, and now each of them will give to, like one will give to the Democratic candidate to get into those events, and one will give to the Republican candidate to get into those events. And then they actually are befriending both sides. Now you can argue, well, lobby groups do that too, and that's true, they do. And I get that. But that's the point. This is a tactic for them to influence both sides. The entire thing that the Muslim Brotherhood wants to do is influence, manipulate, and gather intelligence. That's all they're here to do. Manipulate and have an impact on the decisions that are made, and at the same time, they're gathering information. Their entire structure here. Now, why did I just go into all that? Because it leads into explaining this. If I'm a Muslim brother, and I go, sir, what's your first name? What's your first name?
Joe.
So I go to Joe, and Joe's a, let's say he's a 3-star general. Let's say I go to him, and he's got a major command. And I go to Joe, and I say, Joe, my name's Said. I'm sure you've heard of me. You probably saw me up on the Hill because I was advising on those hearings. And I'm one of the directors of the Islamic Society of North America. And I'm here to, obviously, if you just look at my credentials here, I'm a scholar, and I can help you and your troops and your officers understand Islam because it's very complex, it's very confusing. There are 1,000 interpretations of Islamic law, and then you've got these terrorist groups out there just muddying the waters, so I can help you understand. Well, so he agrees. Well, okay, well, see what you got, and they start a relationship. And then over time, they're having lunch maybe every week, and they're talking, and they're building a friendship. And next thing you know, Said says, well, I've got some people who can come in and train your troops. And now all of a sudden, you have the Islamic Society of North America, the largest Muslim Brotherhood entity, an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial, largest Hamas trial in U.S. history. Factual evidence entered in that trial demonstrates direct monies going from ISNA and its leadership to Hamas. And now this is the group that's now advising this commander and his troops going overseas to fight a war against Al-Qaeda. It's happening all over the United States. Now, that's how it works, practically speaking. Now, we don't have time to get into it, but they do write books on how to recruit Christians in the African American community, how to speak, how not to speak, and that it's always done in a. And this is the reason I wanted to share this. So, can you tell me what that phrase says right there?
How to present.
How to present. Call the people to the fold of Allah in pleasing words with wisdom, and argue with the addressees in a manner which is best. Deal with people of the Scripture, deliver the message in a pleasing and refined manner. Speak gently. Present the message in a respectable manner with dignity and patience. And on and on. Generally, when you're in a room with these guys, the nicest guy in the room is the most dangerous guy in the room. And people say, well, that's kind of a ridiculous statement, until they go into these presentations and we say, okay, these are the 3 Muslim brothers, key guys in the room. Just watch. And what happens? They're the nicest guys in the room. Smiling, really just drippingly nice people. But I will tell you, with the exception of only a couple guys, they are actually very pleasant to hang out with. But you just got to remember, that's the enemy. And I think the problem is somehow there's a disconnect there. That someone who's nice to me, to my face, cannot be a bad person. And I think we all know that's just not simply the way the world works. Right? That's the framework for behind how they intend to do it. And if we can demonstrate that they're actually doing it. So here's the last page of that strategic document in a list of organizations. Now remember, this is a 20-year-old document. The list of our organizations and the organizations of our friends. Imagine if they all march according to one plan. Interesting, NPR said, well, you can't really count on this document Because it says, imagine if they all march according to one plan. So maybe they're just hoping that these will be their organizations. I mean, I don't know how you take a disconnect from reality like that. This is their strategic document that they did not publicly publish, that they never expected to see the light of day. These are the groups that we know. And by the way, as I mentioned earlier, this isn't the only document that is the reason we know that these are Muslim Brotherhood groups. They're all Muslim Brotherhood, and a good number of them, especially these right here, these are Hamas groups. This is actually the Holy Land Foundation before it changed its name. Those are Hamas. So what do they represent? Well, 20 years later, they are still the most prominent Muslim organizations in the United States. IIIT, the Islamic Circle in North America, the IAP, whose leadership created CARE, the Fiqh Council of North America, which we've talked about twice, the North American Islamic Trust, which is their bank, primarily funded by the Saudis, Muslim Student Association, and the Islamic Society of North America. Now, for time's sake, I only can cover a couple other things, and then I want to walk down to a couple examples. As a part of that strategic document, this is one of the pieces. Understanding the role and nature of work of the Islamic Center in every city with what achieves the goal of the process of settlement. And what was the process of settlement? Well, I think the process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process. So what their own strategic document says is, the center we seek is one which constitutes the axis of our movement, the perimeter of our circle of work, to educate us, prepare us, supply our battalions, and oh, by the way, to be the niche for our prayers. Remember when in New York, there was all the upheaval over building the Ground Zero Mosque? And Imam Faisal Rauf, who is an Islamic scholar, whose father was a senior scholar at Al-Azhar, by the way, he knows this Islamic law. He actually wrote a book on Islamic law, which says you must impose Islamic law on the world, but that doesn't get a lot of press, even though you can buy the book and read it in English. That guy, remember what he said on TV? No, don't worry, this isn't a mosque, it's an
Muslim center.
It's an Islamic center. That's what the Muslim Brotherhood uses these for. They're telling you in their document what it is. Again, this is not the only document, but it's one that spells it out pretty clearly. Is that fair? Does this create a problem? What they wanted to build on 9/11 is a Muslim Brotherhood Islamic Center for that purpose. And what they probably will end up building there. Now, do you think we'd let the Soviets build a military base in Asheville?
Maybe. Maybe, right.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to stir you up like that. You guys are going to keep me on my toes. All right, now, there are 246 unindicted co-conspirators in the Holy Land Foundation trial. Unindicted co-conspirator means there is enough evidence to indict. Now, we can discuss why they're not indicting them. As a matter of fact, over a year ago, March 31st, a year ago, 2010, the Department of Justice specifically said, we will not pursue further indictments. Specifically on the two top targets, which the FBI office and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Dallas were pursuing for 18 months, 19 months of work on the next level of prosecutions in this case. And DOJ shut it down. And we actually have the letters that are now, and we have a series of reports by a guy named Patrick Poole, where he talked to a senior Department of Justice official who gave him some very specific inside information that was initially denied by the Justice Department. Then Congressman Peter King said publicly, this is true, I found out through my own sources. And then finally DOJ said, yes, we are not pursuing further indictments. 246 unindicted co-conspirators. Who are they? Well, ISNA, NATE, and CARE are three of them. When the government put out their list, ISNA, NATE said, we want our names off the list. And the government responded by saying, ISNA and NATE, the Islamic Society of North America, in fact shared more with Holy Land than just a parent organization, the Muslim Brotherhood, They were intimately connected with Holy Land, and its assigned task of providing financial support to Hamas. So if I tell you 2 days ago at the White House at the iftar dinner, the president of ISNA is in a photo in the front row, is that or is that not a problem? And if I tell you that the same leadership of ISNA was with President Bush at the iftar dinners, and with President Clinton, this is not a bipartisan it's a bipartisan failure, not a one party or the other. The U.S. Muslim Brotherhood created the Palestine Committee, which documents reflect was initially comprised of 3 organizations. The Palestine Committees were formed by the International Muslim Brotherhood to be fronts for Hamas in every Western Islamic country, to raise money, propaganda, and recruit men for jihad for Hamas. We have documents that walk that all out. So we know that it was initially comprised of these 3 organizations, one of which became the Holy Land. CARE was later added to these organizations. So they're telling you CARE is Hamas, and the mandate of these organizations per the International Muslim Brotherhood was to support Hamas. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization. So why CARE was formed in 1994, they're still walking around, their office is 2 blocks from the U.S. Capitol. A fair question is why are they still operating? If this is what the U.S. government is proffering, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Dallas, Texas is proffering as fact. Well, after hearing all the evidence, the federal judge, this was just released in the fall of 2010, but it was sealed prior to that. And in the memorandum, the judge said the government has produced ample evidence to establish the association of CARE, ISNA, and NATE with Holy Land, the IAP, and Hamas. And it went to the appellate court, and a 3-judge appellate court panel unanimously ruled saying, your names will not be removed from the unindicted co-conspirator list because the facts are overwhelming. And what we have, CARE is Hamas. And we know ISNA and NATE are part of the Hamas support network. Why is this important? Why did I choose these 8? Because these are the most prominent groups working with the government today. Let's see. MPAC, NATE, MAS, okay, take a look at them. Let's see. As we look, this is a graph that tracks dates and the number of Islamic 501c3s created in the year. And all I want to show you is there's a relationship to when they were created and why, based on the strategic documents that we have. If you remember, and maybe I didn't say it, the Islamic Society of North America was created in the early 1980s and 81. It was being built over these years. When it was formally established, we see a spike of 100 or so 501c3s, just Islamic 501c3s. Why? What are these? Well, if you actually look at the names of the organizations created, a large number of them are the Islamic Society of. So they're all subsidiaries of the Islamic Society of North America, which makes sense because it was just created. And then, of course, we go along, and all of a sudden, in 1991, we start seeing a spike, and it never comes down, and it continues today. Why? Well, if you remember, 1991 is the year the strategic memorandum was written. And right after that, which we didn't get into, another memorandum was written on the implementation of the strategic documents called the Implementation Manual. And it lists out in great, painful detail all the different organizations that need to be created. The social organizations, the women's organizations, the scientific organizations, the media organizations, the legal organizations, if I didn't say it, the women's organizations, the financial organizations, organizations to support work in South America. And then what do we see? This. Between 60 and 120 organizations created annually. Now, today in the United States, there are approximately 2,100 Islamic nonprofits, 501c3s. They are not all Muslim Brotherhood, but a large number are. Now, here's what's not reflected here. How about the for-profit businesses? How about the lobby organizations that we know the vast majority of our Muslim Brotherhood? How about the covert organizations, because we have their documents that show when they have overt organizations, they have a large number of covert organizations. You start adding that up, and you're talking about a large number of organizations whose job it is, what's the purpose of the Muslim Brotherhood? To do what? One thing. Yeah, impose Sharia while reestablishing the global Islamic Caliphate on the entire world. Fair? Isn't that what we've demonstrated in English in their documents? Right? And we could do a lot more, but you're getting the point. If that's true, and they have thousands of organizations across the spectrum, in the financial world, the legal world, the educational world, all working 24/7 to do that, and we have response at the national level. Nothing. Why? Because, well, this is why.
Correctness.
Formally, 2 weeks ago, the administration said they are going to work with the Muslim Brotherhood. Formally, officially. Now, why is this a problem? Well, because that's Mohammed Badi, or excuse me, it's Mohammed Badi, the supreme guide or international leader of the Muslim Brotherhood right there. We're going to work with that guy. This is a guy who last October gave a speech and said, we are now waging jihad against the United States and Israel. Not just the subversive campaign, but full-on violent jihad in tandem with Al-Qaeda. They've changed their strategy as of last October. So what is that? 9 months ago. Then we saw, as things ticked forward, in January, a Muslim brother at Al-Azhar University put out a fatwa to say offensive jihad is now authorized, and less than 2 weeks later, Tunisia, Egypt, Oman, fill in the blanks. Everything started exploding. We were the only ones in the United States that on Capitol Hill gave briefs before Christmas saying that this was coming. And it's not because we're rocket scientists. It's because we just read what they say, we look at the situation, we say this is easy. They are getting ready to turn it on. And that's exactly what they're doing. But the very people charged with your national security not only didn't call it, when we pushed this out, we got pushed back. Wow. And now they're being formally recognized by our government. Let me just flip through a few things. Who's training TSA? Muslim Public Affairs Council. Maybe this explains some things we see at the airport. Here is Secretary of State Clinton with, there's your friend, Joe, Saeed Saeed, and Muslim El-Hanusi from they're directors of the Islamic Society of North America. Remember them? Unindicted co-conspirators in the Holy Land Foundation trial. We also have the documents from the Brotherhood that says ISNA is the leading Muslim Brotherhood entity that was created to be the nucleus for the Islamic movement. And there are their two leaders. These guys have been here for a while. Well, not only are they in a photo shoot with the Secretary, they work with the Secretary's office. And does anybody remember after the first Peter King hearing, then Senator Durbin held a hearing to kind of say, we need to worry about the civil rights of the Muslim community? Who's the first guy who shook his hand at the end? Mohammed El-Sanusi. See that guy right there? There he is. That's Senator Durbin right there in the hearing room. Who else is in the hearing room? Saeed Saeed. These are senior Muslim brothers. How about that? That is Ingrid Mattson right there, the former president of the Islamic Society of North America, in the White House with the current president of the United States. But remember, this is a bipartisan issue. There's the president of the United States with Outlawed, one of the two leaders of Hamas in the United States still today. And there is Khalid Safori, the deputy for Abdurrahman al-Amoudi. Remember him? The Al-Qaeda guy. Left shoulder, right shoulder. Or actually, left shoulder, right shoulder. Did you get my point? This is not a new issue. Well, let me just remember we said that al-Amoudi created the Muslim Chaplain program, and he's Al-Qaeda? Does anybody remember that from 2 hours ago? Okay. So who's certifying Muslim chaplains now for the Bureau of Prisons and the DOD? Well, ISNA. Largest Muslim Brotherhood entity, unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. Did I mention that's the largest Hamas trial in U.S. history? That's who's doing it. That's who's certifying the chaplains. And remember Civilization Jihad by our hands? U.S. Navy Chief of Chaplains, U.S. Army Chaplain Corps, Bureau of Prisons Chief of Chaplain is at this conference. This is penetration to a massive level. Let me give you one more, maybe two more examples, and then I want to get to the national security example here. Although this is all national. Yahya Hendi, one of the leading Muslim brothers in the United States. John, how can you say that? Well, let's look. He's on the Fiqh Council of North America and Muslim American Society leadership, both known Muslim Brotherhood entities. Well, he's also the chaplain, the Muslim chaplain for Georgetown University, and the Muslim chaplain for Bethesda Naval Medical, which might explain, but let me just, here's the Fiqh Council's website. You could do this today in English, right? There it is. History of the Fiqh Council. Let me just read it to you. Fiqh Council of North America traces its origins back to the Religious Affairs Committee of the Muslim Students Association. They're telling you who they are. Now their names, remember, Fiqh Council was on the list of known Muslim Brotherhood names anyway. But that became the Religious Affairs Committee of the Fiqh Committee of the Islamic Society of North America, and then it became the Fiqh Council of North America. And they're giving it to you right there. Well, who's on the list? There's Yahya Hendi. Just in case you thought I was making this up. These are Muslim brothers, and they make up the leading Muslim Brotherhood leadership in the United States, the leading jurists. Well, there he is with President Clinton. And I know what you're thinking. It's those darn Democrats. And I always say, be careful. There he is with Secretary Madeleine Albright, and there he is, President George Bush. And there he is getting an award from the FBI director for being a great citizen. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. I had a guy in Hollywood tell me, this sounds like a bizarre Hollywood movie. I said, well, you make the movies. Can't you make this into a movie? He said, nobody would believe it. He said that. I thought that was pretty funny. So, who's advising Secretary Napolitano? Kareem Shura. Oh, he might be a nice guy. Let's see. Who do you think he invites in to speak with the Secretary of Homeland Security? Well, the leader of the Muslim American Society, Congressional Muslim Student Association. By the way, Soleil Williams' first name is Jihad. Just thought that's interesting. Muslim American Society. This Council of Islamic Organizations in Chicago is Hamas. The American Muslim Council. That's the organization that Abdurrahman al-Moody ran. The Mosque Foundation, well, this is a Hamas leader, Kifa Mustafa. His name's backwards. He's also a named unindicted co-conspirator of the Holy Land Foundation. He's with the Mosque Foundation. You have another guy from the Mosque Foundation. These are Hamas fronts. The Muslim American Society, Muslim Public Affairs Council. That's who Kareem Shura is recommending meet with Secretary Napolitano. And I'm going to have to end on this note to get to the other things we want to cover. This is the Deputy National Security Advisor to the President, Dennis McDonough. And I think for the purposes of making this just really hit home, please allow me to do this.
Rezwan, Stephen, Marshall, Jim McJunkin, nice to see you.
Okay, let me just pause for a minute. That's the Deputy National Security Advisor to the President of the United States inside the Adams Center in Sterling, Virginia, the All Dulles Area Mosque Society. The President, the Executive Director of Adams, is Mohammed Majid. Mohammed Majid is also the President of the Islamic Society of North America. The Adams Center was founded by senior Muslim brothers, Ahmed Tatanji and others, that we're just not going to take the time to walk that down. But I'll show you that on the Adams Center website, they say on their website, we are an affiliate of ISNA. So they tell you on their website who they are. This is the Deputy National Security Advisor at the Adams Center. The guy he just thanked is the Assistant Director of the FBI. And they're all in here, and listen to what he says.
Imam Majid, thank you very much
Imam Majid,
for those very kind introductions and a very warm welcome. I know, Imam, that President Obama was very grateful that you led the prayer at the White House for last summer's iftar dinner. A dinner which, as the President noted at the time, is a tradition that goes all the way back more than 2 centuries to when Thomas Jefferson hosted the first iftar at the White House.
Okay, That's a lie.
Yes, it's a lie.
That is a lie. Thomas Jefferson never hosted an iftar dinner at the White House. It's untrue, factually, historically untrue. No basis in fact for that statement.
Thank you also for being one of our nation's leading voices for the values that make America so strong.
That's Sharia.
Especially religious freedom and tolerance. Whether it's here at Adams or as president of the Islamic Society of North America, you've spoken with passion and eloquence, not only about your own Islamic faith, but for the need to build bridges, as you've demonstrated here, of understanding and trust between faiths. That's evident here today in the presence of so many different faiths. Muslims, Christians, Jews, Baha'i. The fact that we can come together in a spirit of respect and fellowship speaks to the bonds that we share as people of faith and as Americans.
Okay. What do you think the impact, I want you to think about this, and several of you brought it up. If I am a patriotic person and I identify myself with Islam, let's take Zuhdi Jasser. I identify myself as a Muslim. And I see the Deputy National Security Advisor with the leader of an entity I know is a Muslim brother. How much do you think I'm going to want to step out of line and go help the FBI? Do you understand? I worked with Muslims in the community who wanted to help me. And they were scratching their heads like, what is wrong with you people? You do know that the Muslim Student Association, Muslim American Society, you guys are working with, you know they're Hamas Muslim Brotherhood, right? And we'd be like, well, if you get it, what's wrong? You know, there's no logical connection. But this is different. This is the National Security Advisor to the President paying public tribute at a Muslim Brotherhood site to the leading Muslim Brotherhood leader in North America, Muhammad Majid, whose father, by the way, was the Grand Mufti of Sudan. Okay? You understand, when the international Islamic world watches this, they understand. We have got military officers from places like Pakistan, Egypt. They think it's much worse here than it is in their own country with regards to Muslim Brotherhood control. And they've said that directly to us. This is civilization jihad by their hands. And I can tell you that my partner, we were putting together legal arguments to say, if you have a job in the government, or any job, where your professional duty includes national security, then your oath to the Constitution, for those of you who are not aware, is a legally binding oath that's required by the Constitution. And it requires you to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, which comes with a legally binding requirement to know all enemies, foreign or domestic, or do a due diligence search to know all enemies, foreign and domestic. There is a legal hook that comes with being in a position like that. So that not knowing is at a minimum malfeasance. If somebody gets killed in furtherance of you not knowing, I'll just say we put lawyers and doctors in jail for that. You can't say I'm a doctor, I'm a cardiologist, I just didn't take the time to learn this particular procedure. You know what the judge says? The judge says 10 to 20. And I've been in court when it's happened, in federal trials. It happens at the state trial level quite a bit. So I'm going to have to pull out of this video and go back to this ever so briefly, because there's the solid screen capture. And this is what I was talking about right there on the website, the Adams Center website. There it is. We're an affiliate of ISNA on their website. Folks, this is not... Everyone in this room could be a researcher for the government, because it's not. You don't need any training for this. Okay? There's Muhammad Majid, Executive Director Adams, also the Executive Director of ISNA. Okay, because George wanted me to do this, I'm going to run through this next exercise in 90 seconds or less. There's the Adams website. Who knows what? Has anybody ever heard of the 5 pillars of Islam? Just heard of it. I don't expect you to know. Anybody heard of it? They're the 5 required things in Islam you must do. Okay? One of them is zakat. That is mandatory financial payments to organizations that are approved, authoritatively approved to receive your zakat. It's annually given. You go to zakat, you click it. There's something right here called the zakat calculator. And what you do is you put in your income, your mortgage, your bills, your number of children, all this stuff, and it spits out a number. Now, since I'm a Marine, I'm going to say the number is 8,000. So you're required to give $8,000 in your zakat. Okay? Now, oddly enough, if I open up this book of Islamic law, you're going to be surprised that there is a chapter, which is Book H, and very loudly, sir, once again, what's that?
Zakat?
Zakat. So apparently there's some Islamic law in this, and let's go to see on the Adams website, which remember is Muslim Brotherhood, same leader, okay? And what does it say? Zakat distribution. Well, first we know it says, Adams will be pleased to accept your zakat contributions and spend the funds in the best possible way approved by Sharia. Well, did I, raise your hand if you don't think I did I at least reasonably demonstrate that this book of Islamic law was approved by the Muslim Brotherhood? I see all hands nodding. Yes?
Yes.
Yes? Are you good with this, sir? Did I prove it to you?
Listen.
Okay. Apparently I did not prove it to you. Okay. So, they're going to distribute their zakat according with Quran 960. If it's in the Quran, who said it? Allah. Right? Well, it breaks it down into 8 categories. Oddly enough, the 8 categories here seem to correspond to 8 categories in Islamic law. Now, I'm going to go and I want to show you this because when we show analysts at the Bureau and at the agency this, they kind of change their ways. Sir, once again, what's that phrase say?
The 8 categories of recipients.
The 8 categories of recipients. I just do this so you don't think I'm like making this stuff up. Okay, since I don't have. Okay, so ma'am, can you, what's your first name? Leslie. Will you just read the number and then the couple words for each of these, and then I'm going to interject. So like number 1, the poor. Go ahead.
1, the poor.
Okay, the first category is the poor. So we're going to see if this corresponds to Islamic law. Go ahead.
2, the needy.
Those short of money.
3, zakat collection.
Zakat workers.
4, the reconciled.
Those whose hearts are to be reconciled. Does this seem like it's tracking 1 to 1? Okay, keep going.
5, the oppressed.
Those purchasing their freedom.
6, the insolvent.
Yeah, the insolvent. Those in debt. This is a 1 to 1 tracking. Is everyone seeing that? Okay, go ahead.
7, the cause of Allah.
Cause of Allah. Those fighting for Allah. The 7th category is those fighting for Allah, meaning people engaged in Islamic military operations for whom no salary has been allotted in the army roster, but who are volunteers for jihad without remuneration. They are given enough to suffice them for operation, even if affluent of weapons, mounts, clothing, and expenses for the duration of the journey.
Wow. So
now, let me explain to you what's happening here. When all Muslims give zakat, under Islamic law, it's required that minimum of 1/8 goes to jihad. Now, if you support the families of the martyrs, that can fall under the poor, the needy, and those in debt. So literally 4 categories, but at least one which I've just laid out here. When you hear fi sabilillah, jihad fi sabilillah, that is jihad in the cause of Allah. And it means military operations. How about a little of that? So, now I'm going to take a pause and do this. Because I want to be, we're actually, look at that. Oh yeah, so maybe I should do this, since there's only two screens left. So there's the article. Now this article is from 3 weeks ago. It's only got yesterday's date or whatever, because that's when I pulled it up. But this is the article on NPR, where they came after me because we did some training a year ago in April. And we mentioned in one slide, and the slide was that one, and it was a series of slides where I showed that this guy, Bill Vidra, who's the Director of Homeland Security in Ohio, had invited The only people he invited to give presentations to the Department of Homeland Security for Ohio and the people of the Department of Public Safety in Ohio was one of the leading Muslim brothers in the United States, who we showed all the evidence which was entered against this guy at the Holy Land Foundation trial, and then the president for CARE in Ohio, which is Hamas. Those were the two primary speakers. And then I showed this picture, which is that's Babak Darvish, the president of CARE in Columbus, Ohio, and Omar Al-Mari, who is the assistant, until he got fired because we got some things released in the press, who was the assistant to the Homeland Security Director in Ohio. I can tell you our presentation went over like a lead balloon, but it was factual. And but they still wrote this article saying Omar Al-Mari was a great guy, he feels he got pushed out and all this. Funny thing they didn't mention in this article was he failed to disclose he was a senior government official in a foreign government. And on a security clearance, that's a violation of the law. Okay? So that's why he got stripped of his security clearance and fired. He also didn't disclose that he got fired from a previous job for a sexual harassment charge with a student. Okay? But neither one of those. The point is, this is a counterintelligence issue. This is a senior government official. He had a job with as a senior government official in another government. Was never revealed. Not even mentioned in this thing. But this is where we are here. And this is, by the way, Deputy Chief Blackwell, when we were there, was 100% behind us. We explained what was going on. He got it. He said, we need to get you guys back. And when he came down, what did he say? I was shocked that a person at Omar's level in the state of Ohio, Department of Public Safety, would have had his picture displayed by an anti-terrorism group. His reputation was impunged incredibly by the speakers. Impugned. Excuse me. It's my weariness. So, I'd like to end on this. We do not face a global jihadist movement, but a series of disparate ethnic and religious conflicts involving Muslim populations, each of which remains fundamentally regional in nature, and almost all of which long predate the existence of Al-Qaeda. Deputy National Intelligence Officer for Transnational Threats for the CIA. Just one example, I could probably give you 100 more, of guys in senior positions. He retired now a few years ago, but I think that quote pretty much says it all. There's no enemy because we say there's no unified threat, despite the facts. So as I promised, that is my our contact, and it's our website is that. Now before I finish, because I wanted to do a couple things here. Number one, what did the founders think of this issue? Does anybody know?
Oh yeah.
They formed the Navy in order to fight us.
Yeah. Why do we not have a standing army in our Constitution, but we have a standing Navy? Does anybody know?
Because they're a danger to freedom. Standing army.
Barbary pirates?
Because of the Barbary pirates. Because we were fighting Muslims in a jihad. And the founders knew this. One of the things I think that is that's interesting that we try to incorporate is to understand how is it that 200 years ago our founding fathers seemed to have an understanding of this, but we did not. Let me read something to you. You tell me if this sounds like the screed of a violent extremist or someone who's just a hate monger. Muhammad declared undistinguishing and exterminating war as a part of his religion against all the rest of mankind. The precept of the Quran is perpetual war against all who deny that Muhammad is the prophet of God. The vanquished, the dhimmis, may purchase their lives by the payment of tribute. As the essential principle of Muhammad's faith is the subjugation of others by the sword, it is only by force that his false doctrines can be dispelled and his power annihilated. Which hate-mongering bigot do you think said that?
Was it Jefferson or Adams?
John Quincy Adams, President of the United States. How about this? When Thomas Jefferson was the ambassador to France and John Adams was the ambassador to England, they met with the emissary of the Islamic potentates at Tripoli, to Britain, which was Sidi Hajj Abdul Rahman. And he wanted to talk to him about why on the open seas, American ships were being captured, held for ransom in order for the U.S. government to pay ransom. Men killed, women and children enslaved. What's going on? Because this is what Jefferson and Adams wrote in an official letter to the Congress that's now, you can find it in the Library of Congress. We, Jefferson and Adams, took the liberty to make some inquiries concerning the grounds of their pretensions to make war upon nations who had done them no injury, and observed that we considered all mankind as our friend, who had done us no wrong nor given us any provocation. The ambassador, meaning the ambassador representing Tripoli, answered that it was founded on the laws of their prophet, that it was written in their Quran that all nations who should not have acknowledged their authority were sinners, that it was their right and duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found, and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners, and that every Muslim who should be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. Now those are just two examples, but I'm pretty sure that pretty much says it all about how our founders felt about what they were up against. There was much to do that Thomas Jefferson had a Quran.
So what can we do about it?
There's a congressman, Keith Ellison, who swore his oath on the Quran. And he said it was Jefferson's Quran, and Jefferson had a Quran because he thought Islam was a religion of peace, and that was a lie. Or maybe he didn't know. Maybe he was misinformed. I shouldn't say it's a lie, I can't crawl inside his head, but it's definitely not factually true. Jefferson got the Quran because of what we just discussed.
Know your enemy.
And he wanted to know what is this book, and if this is the doctrine the enemy is using to wage war upon it, I want to read it.
So how can we help?
How can you help? What do you think the first thing you need to do is? Educate yourselves and those around you. As you mentioned, sir, we need to learn how to discuss it in a way that doesn't sound like screed. Because I don't think, if you go out there and say, we need to, get all Muslims out of the country stuff, number one, I don't think that's a good idea. Number two, that sounds crazy. And no one's going to listen to you. But if you look factually at the matter, just factually, the vast majority of the Islamic organizations are controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood, who are hostile to us and who seek to overthrow the government. Whether they can do it or not is irrelevant to the fact that that's why they exist and what they're working towards, which is against the law and, by the way, unconstitutional. So let's just start there. But you got to educate yourself first on the basic facts. And I think there are some publications, some of the things that George will send you. We've got a one-page thing on, it's like a one-page self-education thing. Self-education thing.
I made a bunch of copies.
Okay, so maybe you can take some of those with you. It's just a one-pager. And it gives you some things to read and look at. So you got to educate yourself. One of the things, we were just in Nashville, and a guy who I think is one of the really leading guys on taking this message and making it simple for citizens is a guy named Bill Warner. And you can go online, if you just Google Bill Warner in Islam, you'll get it. And he's created these books, like a self-study, these little thin books, level 1, 2, and 3, on what he calls a self-study course on political Islam. And he's also created something on how to speak about this. Now you may be wondering, why are you promoting something that's not yours? Because in case you haven't figured it out, I'm not really here to promote anything. I'm here to educate. And Bill Warner's a good man who's done good research that's rock solid. And so I really don't care how you learn this.
W-A-R.
Bill Warner, W-A-R-N-E-R. Yeah, he's in Nashville. So he's got a book on the Quran, 2-hour Quran, the Sirah, which is essentially the biography of Muhammad, and the Hadith. I mean, this is not thick reading. He really broke it down. It's really what I think is pretty simple, which is why I like it. Because I'm a Marine, I like stuff simple. He's also got it on CDs and DVDs. This is just all stuff in addition to that. I do recommend that you get Sharia, the Threat to America, which is our report. Because what this is, and this is now just starting, it's been out since September, so 9 months ago or whatever that is. But this really goes into detail. It also has the hard copy of these documents that we've looked at here today. So you've got that, okay? I'm going to give you one website that I strongly recommend. And it's NEFA, N-E-F-A, which stands for 9/11 Finding Answers, nefafoundation.org. Now, a couple things. If you're here as a member of an organization, whether it's Act for America, the Tea Party, some political group or whatever, you're just here individually. If you're part of an organization, I recommend you designate a couple people to really go deep on this. Everyone in your organization doesn't need to go deep, you don't have the time. Everyone needs a good understanding, but then a couple people need to go deep so when tough questions come up. And one of the things I recommend is this nefafoundation.org site. Why? Because if you go to, they've got a link on there to featured legal cases. And then you can go to the most recent HLF, Holy Land Foundation trial. It literally walks you down the entire thing with, like it walks you, it gives you a summary. Here's why the case got initiated, blah, blah, blah. And click here to see this document. And blah, blah, blah. Click here to see these photographs. Click here. It is just a tutorial on the case. You won't get through it in a couple hours. It takes you a while. But if you're going to be somebody who's a part of the Tea Party, or part of your church, or a part of a community organization, whatever it is, a business group, to learn about this, I strongly recommend you designate somebody to be your focal point of contact, who has a strong interest, and then they do the deeper research. That's there. Before you ask it, is it a clarifying question?
Just the website again.
NEFA, N-E-F-A, foundation.org. The other thing is we are starting to produce, and others are starting to produce some things. I mentioned the DVD, which will be available. I do recommend that because then everything you've heard here, you can sit down and rewatch as many times you want. I think it's important, obviously. Getting this book. The other thing is, if you're interested, there's the contact. If you hit us on the website or at my email, we'll put you on a contact list, and then we'll send out updates, and you'll get updates. And we will give you here's some new information. But we're specifically not trying to overload you. We're trying to keep it simple, okay? But this is an important issue, and what we're finding is citizens are hungry for this, and they want it. So we can give you as much as you want, okay? Now, practically, let me give you 2 or 3 big principles on what you can do and as you go forward. Number 1, we have found that it's best to go where the ground is fertile. If you know people that are closed-minded and you think you're going to take a stick and go beat them over the head with this, just leave them alone for a little bit. Go where you know people are open-minded and are going to listen. If they at least give you the opportunity to hear you out, that's better than nothing. But I would take it to people that you know are going to hear it. They're going to want to know, okay, show me. You show them the facts, and then they'll be willing to take action. Now, what action are we talking about? I believe you need to, at first, there needs to be a much broader understanding of this. Even the most basic points. Muslim Brotherhood, bad. These organizations working with the government, ISNA, CARE, MPAC, MSA, MAS, they're a Muslim Brotherhood. So they're bad. If A equals B and B equals C, right? A equals C. Remember this basic logic stuff. So if that's true, why are they working with the government? And so your local city councils, maybe you start with your state legislators and ask them, why are our people in Washington only working with bad guys? I want you to tell me. Make them learn about it. Make them give you the answers. But don't do it. If you go in there stomping your feet like, this is going on, it's crazy. Just go in and say, hey, I got a couple questions for you. I've got these. Just pick one piece of this. One simple piece. And I found out that this group is alongside North America's leading Muslim Brotherhood entity, unindicted co-conspirator. Here's what the prosecution said, that they're a Hamas support entity. That's what the judge said, and they're working with our government. That seems weird to me. Can you help me understand this? Start there. And what you'll find is when their eyes come back from rolling behind their heads, you may find they already know about it. We're finding that. And they don't know what to do with it. Start hitting up your U.S. congressman, or congresswoman, and your congressman in this case, your senators, ask them, Why are you allowing this? What are you doing? Now, there are much deeper issues here, too. There are major financial issues. Sharia-compliant finance, which is being taught now to government employees by leading Muslim brothers, and, excuse me, it's a problem. So your tax dollars are now going to fund zakat, which means it's going to fund jihad, depending on if you've invested in certain of these mechanisms. And if you belong to Bank of America or Citigroup, one of those, and some of your money is being used by the other side. So these are important things to think about. When you decide to go after and really pressure somebody, like really put their feet to the fire and say, what's going on? Don't start with the local Muslim Brotherhood leader at the local Islamic Center. It's a bad place to start. Not because they're going to hurt you, but because you are going to get the full breadth of the media, them. They'll get national organization. They know what to do. They push a button, and your name will be in a national news article, and they'll come down here locally, and they want to know why you're a hater, racist, and bigot, and your spouse must be too, and your children, they're poor children, we should drag them out of the house because they're living with haters, racists, and bigots. And you're going to go, whoa, and then you're going to go to your pastors and be like, hey, That's what happens. As opposed to, go to the city council people that are having lunch with these people. I'll tell you one thing a city councilman does not like is anywhere from 1 to 80 people showing up at a city council meeting, banging their feet on the floor, saying, we want you to knock this off. We've seen it work around the country. If you do it legally and you do it right, you utilize your liberties to express your distaste and your displeasure with the fact that they're working with enemies of the United States. You will see change, but it's got to be persistent. One of the most important things you need to do, should we cut?
No, I just wanted to make an announcement that we want to pass this around for donations for John coming out and being so nice and giving this presentation.
Thank you.
Keep
Didn't
going.
need to do that, but thank you. I am not getting paid fees. So here are a couple things. I think the other thing that all of you need to do is think about this information, digest it, and then think, if this is what we've described, I will argue we have an imminent and serious threat. Does anybody disagree with that? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, so if that's true, and we've demonstrated at least enough for you to realize there might be something to it that the national leadership of the very organizations, not just an administration, but the organizations legally chartered to protect you, are not doing that. As a matter of fact, they're working with the very people who are enemies. Does anybody realize? I think we all do, right? That's a problem. But it's a dangerous problem. Right? Our belief is that you all know your area better than anyone in the federal level, and probably most people at the State House. Right? Except the people that live around here, that are members of your legislature. And if that's true, our opinion is what we're seeing here, for military folks may follow me on this, they've got thousands of organizations set up organically here in the United States. They have a clear mission, well-funded. We have argued to DOD, with getting heads nodded by 3 and 4 stars, that this is an insurgency. And in a counterinsurgency, the focal point of the resistance is what level? Local level. Local citizens getting their city councils to allow the local police to do what they need to do to protect the citizens. That's the way it unfolds. But it starts with people understanding that the threat is real and it's here. Yes, ma'am.
John, I'm really concerned because we've got, the last count was 35 terrorist camps in the United States that have been allowed to openly do their terrorist thing. And it's really disturbing to me, particularly since North Carolina is surrounded by every single state that has these camps. But our government, I don't even know how long they've been here. I just know that they exist. Our government does nothing. And they're spreading all over the world. Venezuela just got a bunch of them now, all over the world.
So a couple things. Do you remember when I mentioned we have a recorded conversation of a senior Muslim brother addressing a group of Muslim brothers in the United States in 1981? During that presentation, he mentioned, and they discussed training camp, Muslim Brotherhood training camps here in the United States, and this was 1981, and that they were across the United States. I mentioned to you the special section was also discussed that does military work for the Brotherhood. That was 1981. We have Jamaat al-Fuqra, which is led by Sheikh Jilani, a Pakistani. Jamaat al-Fuqra, also known here in the United States as Muslims of America. And they have 30, it's in the mid-30s. There are some indications we have about 6 or 7 more, but some are not active and some are. In Virginia, we have in Red House, Virginia, an active camp. These are the local citizens say, and I'll give you an example. That's Red House. The one in Tennessee, the local citizens say, look, we're hearing gunfire. They're training up there. And what did the sheriff do? On camera, he took a local ABC News guy with him. Do you see that?
Yeah.
He went into the camp and he asked the leader of the camp, are you guys training for jihad? He said, no. The sheriff goes, see? And he left. Now, I got to tell you, I don't know that I have words that I can say in this crowd that describe that.
His name was Barney who?
I mean, that's just, I mean, if that's the way you do police work, that's outrageous. But no, I mean, I can tell you that we know that communications have happened between overseas and some of these camps, where the camps have said, okay, what's the timeline, what are we doing? And they just said, just wait for 0 hour. They use that phrase, which is the same phrase we found in other Muslim Brotherhood documents that talk about when you get to the end. Because they're not on a timeline, theirs is based on actions and meeting certain milestones to get to where they're going. They don't put a time hack on it. They wait to see, is the situation right? Yep, now we can go here. But we know that, and what we see around the country, we talk to state and local law enforcement, and I can use I use Virginia as an example, but there are, New York, Nevada, other places. Is you go and you say, okay, what's with the camp? The local cops will say, the FBI came in, they said we're taking over this investigation, and then it does not progress. And we've heard that from no less than 24 law enforcement entities around the country, 24 different states. That what the cops felt were major cases were, federal jurisdiction was claimed, they took over the case, and it's not, you can argue, well, maybe they're not telling the locals, that's true. But the locals see the activity increasing unimpeded for several years and getting more dangerous. And that's going on all over the country. Those are the facts on the ground. Yes, sir.
I heard a couple of years ago, quite a few years ago, from a reliable source in law enforcement that we have a fair problem with this in Buncombe, and I was wondering what you knew about possible problems in Buncombe County and Henderson County concerning this stuff.
I think the problem that we see here in this area, as well as what we're seeing in Tennessee and surrounding states, is pretty similar. I don't know that there's anybody more squared away, more devious, and more savvy than a Marine Lance Corporal and a local cop. And they're the right people to be protecting you. And so the local cops, they know what's going on. In most cases, they may not be able to articulate a word, but they look at a guy and they're like, that guy's a dirtball. And they know it. And usually their instincts are pretty much 90+% right. They know that there's something going on, the hair's on their neck, they know that guy's not a good guy. And that's why usually they're cops. The problem comes is as this stuff bumps up the chain of command. Is you have to understand, you're opening up a whole can of line of discussion, but there are a couple things we've seen problematic. Is number one, the state and local officials get federal monies for being on the Joint Terrorism Task Force and for some of these joint local, like state fusion centers. And so when they start to buck the narrative that's coming down, that this has nothing to do with Islam, but you're like, but all these organizations are Islamic organizations. There seems to be a consistency that your average American sees that you can't talk about at the upper levels. And so that bleeds down. I'm not aware of any penetration into the local law enforcement here. In other words, that Muslim Brothers are employed here locally. I haven't seen that. Doesn't mean it's not going on. But I know near where I live in Virginia, they had 2 Muslim Brothers that were working for the police force. And one of them got indicted and convicted because he was supporting a guy who was trying to kidnap school children in my neighborhood, who's a bus driver, who's a bad guy. So the investigation was on him, and this cop was providing him information on the investigation out of the system. But they're bad guys, and they all work with a local care chapter. I mean, all you needed to do was, okay, he's a cop, and he's working as an off-duty spokesman for Hamas. Like that, you know, goodbye, you're fired. And that's all it would have taken. But one of the guys is still employed 3 years later. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's as much as I know about it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You mentioned briefly that some of the banks and things that were supporting Hamas, how did we find out that? Because it's you mentioned the ones that I...
So one thing that you can do is there's actually on the, I think it's on there, but if it's not, David Yerushalmi has got a website, and I actually think it's davidyerushalmi.com is his new website, but if you Google David Yerushalmi,
Can you spell the last name?
Yerulshami. Yerushalmi. That's right. I'm pretty darn close. Yeah. Now, why is this important? When you get through all the hits on the web about what a hater and a racist and bigot he is, and you can get to his website, and I think it's davidyerushalmi.com, he has an online tutorial about Sharia compliant finance that's worth going through. It takes like 55 minutes. Now, you may be, all these things I'm telling you, you're like, holy cow, I don't have time to do all this. But me telling you in 2 minutes, here's the basics in 2 minutes. The two pieces to this. Number one, after the 2008, well, actually in September of 2008, under the Bush administration, they authorized TARP funds to go to pay for Department of Treasury training about Sharia compliant finance in order that the U.S. government be Sharia compliant in their financial transactions to allow Sharia compliant entities to participate in our system. Just in case I'm not being clear, if it's Sharia compliant finance, it means it's financial mechanisms that are compliant with Sharia. So any interest in money earned through mutual funds or individual stocks or any monies or any applications thereof necessarily have to comply with Islamic law, which means it complies with the fact that monies must go to support jihad that come off of those and come through those. Citibank as an institution has been deemed by the Sharia compliant authorities, who are all the leading Muslim Brotherhood individuals in the world, have been deemed to be Sharia compliant. I believe Bank of America still holds the check for being Sharia compliant, and there are others. There are individual, there are sovereign wealth funds that are, they have the Sharia index now on the Dow Jones. So, yeah. All right, we need to close. I want to thank you. I know that, as you know, there's a lot more to talk about, but that's why we're going to lunch. Would you like to announce the location?
Mezzalumas, 2 blocks that way.
It's on Main Street, right by the Black Rose, next to the Black Street.
So the whole purpose of this is I'll go there, and as long as you want to talk.
We only have the room until 1, so.
What's that?
We only have this room until 1.
So we need to leave right now. Thank you very much, and appreciate it.